technology. There is a button on the microphone. You'll need to push it so it turns bright red if you're speaking. What's being circulated are the minutes from the last meeting. I'm going to give everybody just a couple minutes to
we are webcasting.
To review those, and then we'll ask for approval. I will remind everybody that we are webcasting out to the world, so be on your best behavior. Look good, everybody.
I put lipstick on.
Thank you, Claudia. I almost did.
You told me to look good. I'm working on it.
And I assume that's some construction we got going on.
It is,
All right.
and you might also mention that we've lost 2 members, that Jan Richards has
Yeah,
retired,
right.
and that William Durham has resigned.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, and introduce the new member, Cesar. We have a new student member.
Okay, cool. While folks are reading, I would take a second just to run around. I think we do still have a few new faces. We're all getting settled down into the new structure. Some folks who are here for the first or second time. We have lost 2 members recently due to retirement, and so we lost Jan Richards, who retired, and William Durham out of Lone Star has taken another position. And we have a new student member, is that correct? Great. I'll tell you what, James, let's start with you, and we'll come around and introduce yourself real quickly while everyone's reading their minutes.
I'm James Andrews, Texas State University, San Marcos.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. You did good.
Cesar Ayala from the University of Texas at El Paso.
Matt Baker from Texas Tech.
Roy Bartels from Western Texas College.
Amy Birchett from Howard College.
Nathaniel Hewitt, Wiley College.
Claudia McDonald, Texas A&M Corpus Christi.
Randy McDonald from Stephen F. Austin State University.
Ann Morris from Panola College.
Paula Nichols, Lamar University.
Bhagya Srinivasan from Lamar State College, Orange.
I'm Rob Robinson with UT San Antonio.
Van Davis here at the coordinating board.
Gabe Umstead Perry from the coordinating board.
Kingston Yamafani at Texas Southern University.
Patrick Plush, University of North Texas.
Antonio Renee, Texas A&M Health Science Center.
Marshall Shaw, University of Houston.
Ron Thompson, Director of Virtual College of Texas. For administrative purposes, I'm with ACC, Austin Community College.
Mark Workman, Blinn College.
Anya Sebastian, Coordinating Board.
All right, thank y'all. If everyone's had a chance to review the minutes from the previous meeting, I would ask for a motion to approve. Second?
Second.
Are there any comments, changes, amendments to the minutes?
Who made the motion? I know Claudia seconded.
I'm sorry, who made the motion? Nathaniel, thank you.
Hewitt from Wiley College.
Got it, thank you.
Claudia seconded.
All right, hearing no discussion, all in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Same sign. Thank you. Van?
Very quick update on some things that are going on here and going on down at the Capitol that if you're not aware of, you should be aware of. We are, as we all know, in the midst of legislative session. There have been 2 pieces of legislation filed that have some bearing to the things that Distance Education Advisory Committee works with. The first is HB 1460. That was filed by Representative Branch, who, as you may know, is chair of the House Higher Education Committee. That bill includes a number of the things that were suggested from the cost efficiency study that the coordinating board did over the summer. What is of most significance, I think, to this committee and of most interest is that it includes a section which would require institutions to place 10% of their offerings online. For the purposes of our analysis, online education would include hybrid. It would include anything that diminishes the need for physical resources on a campus. So we're interpreting that to mean less than 100%, that hybrid education would be included in that. That bill does not have a hearing date yet. I think it's probably a very safe bet that it will have a hearing since the chair of House Higher Education is the bill's sponsor. There's a second piece of legislation that you may hear about that doesn't directly concern your institutions, but you may still hear it mentioned, and that is HB 560. HB 560 is an e-textbook bill. That is not, though, dealing with higher ed. It is e-textbook only dealing with K-12. And it also includes open source materials. So you may hear some mention of that. There has not been yet an e-textbook post-secondary bill filed. It's possible that that might happen. We had something filed last session asking us to do a study, so it's very possible that we might see something filed this session. Right now, we're looking at about 50% less bills filed than this time last session. That obviously reflects the pressing issues of the budget and of redistricting. So it will, we're still in a holding pattern to try to get a sense of what other pieces of higher ed legislation are going to be filed and how far they're going to go. Just as an FYI, you may hear mentioned that the coordinating board, that there's legislation that would consolidate us with TEA. There is a bill that has been filed that would consolidate us with TEA. It's a piece of legislation that has been filed before and has never gone to the floor. So, but just in case you hear anything, in case you hear any rumors that of our imminent demise, that's probably where they're coming from. A couple of other things. I mentioned to you last time that we have a initiative from the College Access Challenge Grant on adult degree completion called Success by Degree. We have, since our last meeting, chosen the institutions that are going to be participating in that. Several of you actually are representing those institutions. We have Texas Tech, we have Lamar, we have the UNT system, we have UT Brownsville, University of Houston Downtown, University of Houston Clear Lake, Midwestern State University, and Texas A&M Commerce are all going to be participating in the first year of this program. We have a media relations company, Milkshake Media, that is going to be working with us on the publicity for this project. They're also the organization that is doing the Generation Texas campaign. And we hope to, by the end of the week, have a contract signed with a company that will be doing the web portal. And I want to thank Rob and Bhagya, who graciously agreed to serve as external evaluators for that RFP last week. So it is something that we're moving on very quickly. Every single one of the institutions that is going to be highlighted on the degree portal is offering at least one online degree completion program. So we had hoped that about half of them would. It ended up that all of them are. So obviously, as we all knew, distance education is playing a significant role in adult degree completion. A couple of other things. I think probably most folks in here, if not listening to it in person, have certainly heard and read after the fact about the governor's State of the State address a few weeks ago that challenges Texas institutions to come up with a $10,000 baccalaureate degree, including books. That is a challenge that we're taking very seriously here at the coordinating board. We're working on what some possibilities are of what that might look like. Online education is playing a significant role in our early discussions. I believe that we will probably be convening a group of faculty and administrators to sort of serve as an advisory committee on that. I would anticipate that if that happens, we may be asking some of you folks as the distance education professionals to assist us with that. So if you hear discussions of that, you'll know that we're working on it, and if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. One last item that we'll actually need a little bit of discussion on.
All right.
We have 2 rule revisions that are minor, but I want to make sure that you're aware of them. One of them is actually going forward to the March SPP meeting and the April board meeting. And that proposal would require institutions that are going to offer a doctoral program via distance education. They would still go through DEAC. You would still review it. You would still make a recommendation to board staff, but the decision would be made by the commissioner or his designee. It would not go to the full coordinating board anymore. We've made that recommendation because for the last several meetings, all of the distance education doctoral programs have been on the consent agenda. And we felt pretty confident that because it would still go through DEAC, because it would still go through the rigorous review here, it would still go through the rigorous staff review, that having it actually go to the full coordinating board at this point is probably no longer necessary. So that revision is actually on the agenda for the March Strategic Planning and Policy meeting and the April board meetings. That rule revision has been posted to the Texas Register for public comment, and we've not received any comments yet. But if you wish to, you can either make those comments now or you can certainly send them to McGregor Stevenson with a copy to me. The other possible rule revision we very much would like your feedback on right now. As all of you know, any off-campus courses or electronic to group courses that are not a part of an approved distance education degree program and are not being offered at a MITSE or University System Center have to have a notice period of 60 days. All of the area institutions within a 50-mile radius have to be notified 60 days before the course is offered. That gives us a 30-day period for those institutions to object and for us to try to work those out. It has been suggested that because we receive so few course objections that we should consider removing that notification for courses. Degree program notifications would still continue. Before we move any further with this, we would like your input on the matter. We talked to the Undergraduate Education Advisory Committee that met on Friday, and there were no negative comments about that, but you are the folks that deal with this much more frequently. So we very much would like your input right now on whether or not you think it's wise for us to continue in that direction.
I'll open the floor for some discussion on that. Anybody who's participated in this process that has a burning feeling one way or the other?
Yeah, I don't see a downside to it, really. I mean, from my perspective.
Great, thank you. Others? Go ahead, Randy.
Well, I heard what you said about program notification would have to be given. What I'm concerned about is often individual courses that are thrown out there may turn into a program, or if you do 2 or 3 courses out there and get some folks headed towards what could be a degree, then you've never really talked about a degree or at least gotten approval for it. But yeah, you've kind of got these people in the pipeline, and then at some point you're going to have to cut them off. So it seems, I don't know, it seems like it could be dangerous from that aspect. I'm certainly for not having to, do more notification or creating more paperwork, but...
So your concern is sort of backing into a program by dribs and drabs of adding courses here and there, and suddenly you've got a program?
Yeah, if we, over time offer 70 or 80% of the courses needed for a degree without ever telling anybody, then we're going to come up and say, well, look, these people finished 80% of a degree. Surely you've got to approve our program. And then somebody else might not want it approved, and the students are kind of in a bind.
I'd like to follow up on what Randy said. I mean, I think that there is a real likelihood that you're going to have what I call degree creep or mission creep if we eliminate the current concurrence notification system. I mean, I find it very helpful in terms of framing up an institutional response if I know what other institutions are doing in the region. To find out about it, again, as late in the game as Randy suggests, would make it highly problematic that we could even respond to the need.
I'd like to know then, again, I hear what you're saying, but if you count courses, is that going to make you, if we keep the rule as it is it going to make you any more aware than you are right now? I mean, you're seeing courses creep in and people approve, it'll still get to that, to me, it'll still get to the degree or program level. But I don't see the difference to approve courses or not. For notification.
Well, you know, sitting in the middle of the wild, wild west, as I do, you know, I get these things constantly, and it's really helpful for me to see what other institutions are doing in the region. And if our institution can better meet those needs, I'd rather be able to have the opportunity to talk to that student population, which is typically going to be a school district. I mean, let's be clear, most of these programs are coming out of our colleges of ed. Most of them are in alignment with area school districts. If we know early on, we can work with that school district to put a program together to meet their needs. If we find out about it again after we've already got students in the pipeline approaching degree completion, frankly, it'd be irresponsible for us to raise an objection at that point and prevent those students from completing a degree.
Other comments? Go ahead.
Just for clarification, we're talking about 4 years, right?
Correct. We are only talking about upper division undergraduate courses and graduate level courses. 100 and 200 level lower division courses would continue to go to the higher education regional councils.
Okay. Maybe as maybe there could be an intermediary solution or a mid-range solution so that maybe not every course that we can think of, if an institution wanted to do, you know, one random course
You need to turn your mic on.
Oh, it's better.
Okay.
I'm just not up close to it. Maybe we don't have to report every course, but if you were going to do a certain number of courses within a time frame, or a certain number of courses that might apply to one of your programs together, maybe you'd have to report that. Now, so maybe, just for an example, one course a year, you might not need to report it, but if you were going to do 6 courses per year, perhaps you would, or something. I don't know the numbers, but instead of an all or nothing thing, maybe there's a mid-ground that is appropriate.
Let me add to that. Maybe if we looked at percentage of courses offered for degree programs, say you have to provide 50%. If you have 50% out there, then make the notification at 50% of the degree. Would that help, Marshall?
No, it would. It would. I mean, I think it's kind of irresponsible anyway for an institution to just throw a course out a year. I'm not sure what kind of, from a public policy perspective, what kind of need they're meeting with individual courses. But if they're going to offer a critical mass, again, maybe it's 50% as sort of the litmus test over a 1 or 2 year period. I think that's when we'd really want to know about it. The individual courses, you know, I don't need any more emails any more than anybody else does. But if it looks as though they're building a degree program or a cohort, and that's certainly their ultimate goal, I think the earlier we can be made aware of that, the better we all are.
Nathaniel?
You know, as I listen to this, Wiley is going through reaffirmation right now, and I'm wondering, do we have to be concerned about any SACS-related issues that may accompany this?
I don't think so. Do you, Van?
I would never want to speak for SACS. My understanding of current SACS policy, and one of the benefits of now working at the coordinating board and not an institution, is that I no longer have to keep up with SACS policy, is that it's when you hit that 50% mark, that's the magic mark for SACS, where they consider it to be an online program that triggers a substantive degree change. I know that some folks in here, like James and some others, have gone through this much more recently. Am I correct?
At 50%, you send the proposal. At 25%, you send a letter of notification. So even something similar to that, as Marshall, might be fair warning. And we do have institutional online degree program creep. So it's hard to monitor internally for us. And so we do it 3 times a year. And maybe if we sort of follow something like that, at different percentages at notification, then like you say, would cut down on the emails. And really, I think you'd be better informed, because if these things come up by course and say, in our case, maybe every 2 or 3 years they add a course. And I think the SACS is the history of that through a 7-year period. So you're going back and you're checking through 7 years to see if you hit the 25% or the 50%. And that's when the notification or the proposal goes up to SACS. So if you had some way to monitor that, then it would make sense at those levels of notification, rather than, to me anyway, rather than just by course, because it's too hard to keep up. It may be 7 or 8 years.
Did you get enough?
We did. Actually, we'll go back and talk about this some more before we do anything, and come back to you guys. Thank you very much for that perspective. And you can leave your mics on too, by the way, if you want to.
Just be careful.
Yeah, all right.
Next item on the agenda, we've had 2 proposals come to us for doctoral programs to be offered at a distance. And first, let me apologize. The last time we met, we reconfigured the doctoral subcommittee, and then I completely spaced that out and went with the previous configuration of the doctoral subcommittee when we dealt with these. And I was just reminded that, hey, we had other people that we could have leaned on, which actually would have made my life a little easier. But so I do apologize for those folks. We haven't forgotten you. Your turn is coming, and but for these 2, we went with the previous configuration of the group. And the first one that we want to discuss is the one from Sam Houston State University. It is a distance education doctorate of education with a major in developmental education administration. This is a reworking of a previous proposal. I will say that it is significantly improved from the last time we saw it. We did collect a set of recommendations, and at this point, though, I'd like to ask Bhagya and James for their general overview, and if anyone else has chosen to read these.
We also have Beverly Reddy, who's the dean of the College of Ed, and we've got SHU.
Excellent. Let me acknowledge some folks from Sam Houston State. Sorry about that. We have somebody who has perfect timing, just walked in and sat down, and you are? Can you hit that button on your microphone right in front of you? Yes. So it'd be bright red.
Hi. I'm Beverly Irby. I'm the Associate Dean for Graduate Programs in the College of Education at Sam Houston.
Thank you.
Nice to be here.
And we have somebody online as well?
Yes. I am Genevieve Brown. I'm Dean of the College of Education at Sam Houston State. And we also have
Bill Angrove, Distance Education at Sam Houston.
I'll just go in there.
Great. Thank y'all.
We have some others.
Stacey Edmondson. I'm actually in North Carolina, but I'm the chair of the Department of Educational Leadership and Counseling at Sam Houston.
Stacy's on an NCATE site visit.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you all for joining us. The process, just to reiterate for everyone, in general, when a doctoral program has been proposed to be offered at a distance, the DEAC is asked to review those elements of the proposal that are specific to distance delivery. We don't go in and look at the same issues that other groups here at the coordinating board look at. We are really making sure that the distance students are going to be supported well, that faculty are trained, et cetera, for this type of delivery. Having said that, let me go back to where I was and ask that James and Bagya, if you have some general comments, and then we'll move to what we discussed as a group.
I just remember, I don't remember the email that I sent back with the feedback. Bagya, you responded to that. Maybe you can recall some of the things that were in the list that when you compiled it.
Yes, I think one of the first thing that came to my mind was the signature page was not signed. And I guess that's one of the most important part, because it doesn't give us any indication of who is actually submitting this form. So it wasn't there in the earlier submission. It's not here in this submission either. So if you would do that, that would be good. We had a question on, you already had an existing face-to-face program, and you're proposing this as a distance-ed program. What happens to the enrollment between the two? Do you think it's going to affect the enrollment that's already there in your master's program? I have been reading some of the places where you say that the enrollment is decreasing in your master's level program. So if it's decreasing there, how do you account for an increase in enrollment in your online program?
I'm going to defer to Dr. Edmondson, who is the chair of the department, on this particular question. But this is the developmental education doctoral program, and so it's a separate doctoral program from our educational leadership doctoral program. So that's may not be clear, but it's a separate and different and distinct program.
Okay.
Right.
Yes. Okay, Dr.
We do not have an existing face-to-face doctoral program in developmental education administration. So this would be a new program online.
Yeah, I think if you could just clearly mention that would help.
Okay.
We are also talking about two different kinds of learning management systems. You talk about e-college, and you also talk about Blackboard. So how exactly is it going to be delivered? Is it e-college? Is it Blackboard? Is it a combination of the two? And we would also like to see how are you going to inform your students as to which particular system is being used, and anything dealing with the system, if you could make that clearer here.
Okay. And I'm going to send that question to our Associate Vice President for our distance education, Mr. Bill Angrove, and his team.
Yes, that will be in the e-college learning management system, and we'll be communicating that via some marketing efforts that we have underway on campus that will include our website and some direct mail marketing and some radio advertising and a call center that we're developing.
Can you explain to us a little bit about the orientation process that you'll be doing for students? How exactly will you be doing it? Is it, you say you're going to do it through video, but then how will students know how to access the video? And if you could just give us some kind of an explanation on how this process is going to happen.
Okay, I'll begin that discussion. On our College of Education website, we have the, first of all, the departmental website for the program, Department of Educational Leadership and Counseling. And then also we have the Office of Graduate Programs website. So it will be on both of those. There will also be a link out to that from our overall graduate studies at the university, that website, and also on the Delta website. So there will be links linking to the orientations that we will have via video or stream video through various websites.
Is this going to be interactive kind, or is it just a plain one-way video?
That's one way. The video is one orientation, and then also Mr. Angrove can probably address this as well, but we do have interactive capabilities as well via eCollege, through Eliminate, as well as other software programs too. Mr. Angrove or Dr. Emerson?
Go ahead. Go ahead. And we also have video conferencing as well.
Yes, networking.
And I would add that because this is a cohort program, these students will have already had personal contact with our doctoral director, and so the orientation to the program rather than to the actual software that's being used would be ongoing with that personal relationship, and that would take place via video conferencing, online meetings, and those sorts of processes.
Webinar types.
Yes.
Yes.
And what about faculty training? Is it going to be done before, after, during the whole, when the program is going on?
One of the really great things about our faculty, we have a great infrastructure with our faculty. We've been working with online education, our distance education for over 10 years. And we have had training, constant trainings. We have a college professional development committee as well as a technology committee. And those two committees provide and work with the Delta Center, which is our distance center, and computer services for providing that training. So it's an ongoing training. They have been trained. They have put up courses online and been teaching online. I don't know if anyone else has anything else to add to that.
Right. Yes, I didn't hear the question too clearly, but based on your response, I would add to that all of our faculty in our department have been trained in eCollege and previously had experience with Blackboard, so they are very well equipped. You know, all of our programs have at least some online component. We have a master's program that's offered completely online, so they are very familiar with how to put their courses online, how to best practices in offering those courses online, and very familiar with maneuvering through the program as well.
Yeah. When the group met and we reviewed the proposal, we did want to thank you for greatly improving it from the first time we saw it. And our recommendation to, as a subcommittee to the DEAC as a whole, was to recommend tentative approval of the proposal with asking for some written clarification of many of the issues that we brought up here. And we have a list, and so we will get that to you. I will be sending that to Dr. Davis, and he'll get it to you.
Thank you.
Perfect. Yes, we'll be happy to clarify anything that's been questioned about.
But at this time, we need to move that to the formal step, and so what we're going to ask y'all to do is to exit yourself, and then we will have a very short discussion, I hope, about following up on that recommendation, and then the final disposition will be given to you by Dr. Davis.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for coming here. Appreciate it. And thanks to everybody on the line. You can stay on for the next agenda item, I think. I don't know. What do you think? Yeah. Okay. The advice from the coordinating board staff is if A&M would drop off and come back on in about 10 minutes, that would be great.
Can't we mute our end?
Hello? All right, we're going to assume that took place. Okay, folks, you heard the recommendation. The proposal itself, I will say, was a significant improvement from the first time we saw it. First time we saw it, we didn't even want to bring it to the DEAC as a whole. We gave them a broad set of recommendations to clarify and kicked it back to them. They did address many of those. There were still some areas that were generally vague, I thought, but in general, they seem to be willing to act on the recommendation that we asked for, and so if we can suggest to them that they clarify these areas that we're a little still fuzzy on in the proposal, that we give them tentative approval so that they then don't have to wait for the next DEAC meeting for full approval. Sense? All right. Go ahead.
Rob, can we know what areas you still have concerns about?
Sure. Rob. Yes. Okay, so is somebody on the line? Texas Women's University, can I ask you to hop off the line for about 10 minutes? Thank you. Thank you for noticing the beep. All right. Very quickly, I think Boggia touched on many of the issues. Most prominent, really, in terms of formality, there was no signature page, nor did they really address some of the funding issues. Now, that's not critical for the DEAC's concern, but it is something that they need to recognize that this is a high cost, potentially a high cost option for them. They had some statements, they duplicated some things, but again, Boggia's points, in summary, Boggia and James's points, the signature page, the relationship of the existing program to the new proposed program, clarification of some enrollment statements that they made, as to what platform it was going to run on, how some of the student communication takes place. It was a little unclear. When emails would go out. James, do you have something?
One of the biggest things I found was that they really had no connection to what they were going to do with their orientations, on what they were going to do to get students prepared to complete this degree online. I think that was one of the major things that stood out, I think, for us.
And addressing faculty training, I mean, she clarified that that is an ongoing activity, but it wasn't represented in the proposal. Reference to that. Really, so nothing that would be a deal killer from the point of view of the doctoral subcommittee. Would that be a fair? All right. So acknowledging those items, that we then send those to coordinating board staff to be forwarded to Sam Houston. What I'd like to ask for is a motion which would recommend that this Sam Houston State proposal for distance-delivered doctorate in developmental education be tentatively approved with the clarifications requested. All right. All in favor? Well, let me ask, any discussion?
I'm just going to say one thing, and maybe one way to structure the reaction back to Sam Houston. As I looked at this, they took a cafeteria approach to their technology portfolio. They can't do that. I mean, they're going to have to be clear about what they're going to use and what their students are going to access for the program, instead of just stringing along, here half a dozen options that we're looking at.
Right.
I mean, if they're ready to deliver a doctoral program, they need to know what they're going to use. And so I think we really need to reinforce that point to them. Because, again, they sort of put a laundry list of... I agree. Right. Right. We may use this, we may use that, may use something else. They really need to lock in on some technologies that they're going to use for this program, so.
I appreciate that. I've added that.
Other than that, I think it's fine.
I've added that note to the list of things that we'll ask for. Other discussion?
Hey, Rob, I read through it. I wasn't sure how the committee structure works because I'm new to the committee.
I appreciate that.
That's all right.
Thank you. Any comments are more than welcome?
Well, what I'd like to do is I just kind of have a short laundry list. I'll just email them to you.
Perfect.
Instead of going through those right now.
Perfect.
All in all, I think.
Would you agree that in your standpoint, there are no serious defects that with some work that this proposal could move forward?
Don't put me on the spot like that. I've never been on this committee before.
Duly noted.
Okay. I'm learning from the rest of you guys.
Yep. Great. All right. In that case, I'd like to ask for a vote on the motion on the table. Is everybody clear what the motion is? All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Same sign. Thank you. And Van, you'll communicate this. And I'll finish this clarification document, add in. So Matt, if you would send your list to me, I'll make sure it gets in, and then we'll get it to Van.
All right, thank you.
All right. Okay. Next up is the Texas Women's University, and I just asked her, she popped on, and I asked her to step off. Okay. And so who knows when she'll come back on.
All right. You want to move on then to the
well, let me just
A&M Central Texas?
I tell you what, we asked them to jump off too. So
okay.
So until people pop back on, is anybody on the line right now?
Yes, this is the Office of Texas A&M University Central Texas.
Great,
Awesome.
thank you. We'll do that.
Yeah.
Great.
Brett's listening in to us today.
Great, thank you, Brett. Okay, I want to jump to item number 9 on the agenda, and then when Texas Women's comes back on, we'll discuss that doctoral proposal. Item number 9, consideration of recommending approval of proposed institutional distance education plan for Texas A&M University, Central Texas.
I think you want to be on item 8.
Discussion. Thank you, Patrick. Discussion of proposed institutional distance education plan for Texas A&M University, Central Texas. We have, for those who may not know, or and there are some folks who will hear this again, in the history of the DEAC, we used to ask for distance education plans on a regular cycle from all institutions in the state of Texas. Many of you probably participated in the creation of these plans, which then came to the DEAC. The DEAC then had a series of subcommittees that reviewed those, provided feedback back to the institution. The general idea behind those was simply to establish a benchmark of best practices from the institutional standpoint for supporting faculty and students engaged in distance learning. About 2 years ago, it was clear that the plans, that we had covered the ground, that every institution in the state had submitted the plan at least once, some had submitted twice. And it was a lot of work, both for the institution and for the DEAC. And we felt that in general, the institutions that were engaged in distance education had used that document to the best of its ability to establish best practices, and the decision was made that we would no longer ask institutions to provide the distance education report on a regular cycle. Essentially, if you had done it and we had approved it, you were on the list, and that was going to be good for a long period of time. However, we did clarify that new institutions would be asked to submit a report when they were ready to begin offering distance education. And in the last year, we've had 3 new institutions created. And so we have the first recent opportunity to review the distance education report coming from Texas A&M Central Texas. The report has been distributed, but in discussing how we want to move forward with review, it is a fairly hefty, comprehensive document. Some of you probably read it, some of you probably didn't. That's fine. Much like we handle the doctoral proposals, what I'd like to suggest is that we ask for some interested volunteers to form a subcommittee. That subcommittee would be essentially standing through the cycle of the 3 incoming reports. Is that accurate, Van?
Yes, it is.
All right. So the first order of business would be a formal review of the Texas A&M Central Texas report. That would come back to the DEAC for discussion and approval. And then in whatever time we get the next 2, we would then already have the mechanism in place to refer those 2 out. Does that make sense? The other 2 are going to be Texas A&M San Antonio
University of North Texas.
and North Texas Dallas.
And actually, Bob, that's going to come forward as a system.
Okay.
To improve Health Science Center.
Excellent. Great. And of course, if you're associated with one of these institutions, we would ask that you recuse yourself. Probably don't volunteer for this subcommittee.
Or if you're in the system?
Well, that's probably a good idea.
Okay.
What? You don't care? Okay. Matt?
Just, yeah, at some point it'd be nice to hear about what is the suggested sequence of submitting this, because
Yes.
this one was very heavily influenced by Tarleton's previous
Sure.
presence, which
Sure.
made sense to me.
Absolutely.
But that the question is, is there a sequence that would make sense prior to or after SAC's approval of the institution? And Patrick could talk about what UNT's doing if he has knowledge of that. Just for my own benefit, I'm curious.
Excellent. Thank you, Matt.
I may be able to give a little bit of a background on that, Matt. We require, each of these institutions is currently operating under the accreditation of their sponsoring institution. All 3 of them are moving towards SAC's accreditation. We, however, at the coordinating board require in our rules that an institution have an institutional distance education plan on file before they can offer any distance education programs. And in the case of Tarleton, in the case of Texas A&M Central Texas, and in the case of Texas A&M San Antonio, and I'm anticipating in the case of UNT Dallas, they all are going to want to offer distance education programs prior to their own standalone accreditation. Much of the material that we ask for in the institutional distance ed plan is material that they will most likely end up folding into their SAC's accreditation documents. And we did that on purpose so that this step would lead them into that, and that they would be able to get a little bit more mileage out of what we're asking them to provide us. But that's why you're seeing it now rather than closer to their accreditation visits. And they want to begin to offer distance education plans. And I think with A&M Central Texas, it's especially important because a great deal of their mission and outreach is to the military community.
So we could think of the plan as assisting with their accreditation activity. All right, so rather than discussing the contents of this plan for A&M Central Texas, what I'd like to do is ask for folks who are interested in forming this subcommittee on these plans, knowing that you'll have 3 of them, which, if you've been around for a long time, that's easy. At this time, anybody interested in sitting on that group?
Actually, I would like to.
Okay.
Having done these in the past.
So we have James, Nathaniel, Claudia. Did I miss anybody on this side?
I will.
Great. Paula? Anybody over here? Mark? The others wisely just... All right. That's a good group, actually. That's about the right size. What I'll ask then is that, I'm going to look over here at Van, since if he hits me regarding what I'm about to say. What I'd ask is that they then, that you all form up, review this plan, and be ready to report back to us at the next DEAC meeting. Okay. What did you think we were going to? Pardon? Thank you for that clarification. See, this is why I shouldn't get stuck in traffic, and I should get here a few minutes early so we can go over the agenda and remember what it is that we had already talked about. What I would, to clarify, what I'd like the group to be able to do is review the proposal, review the plan, and be able to offer tentative approval to the plan to the institution so that they can move forward unless they see that there are significant problems. In other words, the DEAC would be granting its approval authority to the subcommittee. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. Whew. That makes sense to everybody?
I have one question. When do we anticipate the next meeting?
That's a loaded question during legislative session. I'm hoping that the next meeting would be in April. But again, as we get further into the session, that might have to change.
And the next question, let's get it on, is we have this plan. Do we know the approximate dates the other two are wandering in?
I anticipate that we would have the the A&M San Antonio plan sometime between now and April. And Patrick, you're in a better position to speak to UNT than I am. I've not had any communication with y'all.
Sure, it would probably be April or later.
Okay.
Okay. So we would have tentatively have two to report on in the next one.
Right afterwards.
Right.
Okay.
All right. Is everybody clear now that I am? All right. Thank y'all. And James.
Real quick, who else on this subcommittee, please?
I have James, Claudia, Nathaniel, and Paula.
And Mark.
Mark. Okay, Mark too.
Yep.
And who?
Mark.
Mark Workman.
Claudia.
I missed that one.
Thanks.
I will. At this point, just before we go in and ask for a formal motion to approve the creation of the subcommittee, I'd like to ask the representative from A&M Central Texas if she understands the process and has any comments about the plan itself.
Thank you for the opportunity. This is Jacob Sazi. I am the Director of Instructional Design at Texas A&M University, Central Texas. And from what I could hear, there's a lot of static. You're forming a committee who are going to look at the plan, and then by next meeting, you're going to come to a decision or make recommendations for improvement of the plan. And in the meantime, we can move forward with our preparation for our online programs coming up in the fall, right?
That's all correct. And in fact, the reviewing group, if they see no major areas for improvement, can grant provisional approval in the interim prior to the next DEAC meeting.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I would like to ask for a motion which recognizes the creation of the subcommittee to review distance education plans.
Also moved.
Thank you, Randy. Second? Thank you. All right. I hope we're all clear on this. We've got our first set of volunteers for the distance education plan review. All in favor of the creation of this subcommittee, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. All right. What's our next item?
I think Linda came on.
Great. Do we have a representative from Texas Women's University on the line?
Yes.
Great. Great.
Elizabeth Murphy. I'm the Director of Distance Education, and I'd like to introduce Dr. Sally Stoll, who is our Clinical Program Coordinator.
Excellent, and welcome. Again,
We have online Dr. Jennifer Martin, who is our Vice Provost.
great, thank you. Speaking as a representative of the doctoral subcommittee, we would like to say thank you for writing one of the most clear, concise, well-written proposals that we've ever had the pleasure of reading. It stepped it through. We thought it was exemplary in just about every fashion. We essentially had no comments on the proposal. Is that accurate, James Baggio? Just say yes.
Yes. Yes.
We appreciate that very much.
Baggio? Did anyone else have a chance to read that proposal?
It was great.
Yeah.
Do you guys hire out to help other people?
Also entrepreneur.
That's a self-sustaining program there.
That's right. Yeah, again, thank you for understanding the goals of the plan, the areas that we wish to cover. You address them all well, and in the future we may point others to your proposal as an exemplar.
Would you like us to go ahead and give
Yes, we would love that.
I'm going to ask Dr. Stoll.
Yes, we can.
Describe the proposed program organization of our plan. Nine students learn of offering, and they completed those 2 courses and are now in their 2nd year of study. These are students with an average of 5 years of practice with high-level qualifications, well regarded by their peers and fellow practitioners in practice in the state. This has given the students the opportunity to continue their current employment, fulfill their educational goals, and become the scholars that the profession needs to maximize optimal treatment programming. Briefly, the organization of the program. It will be delivered in a hybrid format using a combination of face-to-face on-campus workshops along with synchronous and asynchronous web-based learning. We plan for the students to be admitted as a cohort and progress sequentially together. We will offer 2 courses each fall and spring semester over a 2-year period. These will be organized classes. They'll be supported with on-campus workshops, having a minimum of 12 hours of face-to-face contact time during the workshop at the beginning of the semester and at the end of the semester. The proposed program also includes the requirement for the students to continue to meet with the research mentor in face-to-face workshops twice a semester throughout the dissertation process. This parallels our proposed face-to-face workshops for the organized classes. I'll move into the phase out of our existing program. The proposed hybrid will replace the campus-based PhD program in occupational therapy. It will be fully phased out by the 5th year of the proposed DE program. Current existing students have already been linked with their research mentors, and they are currently in stages of independent study or dissertation. We do have a strong history of providing doctoral study for the students on the 3 different campuses. We've offered these by video conference in Dallas, Denton, and Houston. Students came to the organized classes on each campus, but sometimes they were never actually face-to-face with the instructor during that particular semester. We believe that the proposed DE program will, in fact, increase the face-to-face contact that our students have. It will also increase the opportunities for students and faculty over this 2 to 3 day workshop period, twice a semester, to have lunch together, to sit around the table together, and to engage in the social networking that we recognize as being critical for doctoral study. In conclusion, it is my pleasure to present the proposed program to you. The School of Occupational Therapy at Texas Women's University is committed to the quality of this program. Faculty workload assignments will continue to be carefully overseen by the director of the School of OT and myself, the PhD coordinator, to ensure that faculty availability is provided for students to achieve the rigorous and meaningful learning experience that we recognize as consistent with doctoral study. I thank you for the opportunity to share these thoughts with you.
And I thank you. I will open it up for any questions for y'all. I'll start. Given the depth of the faculty shortage in this area, are you going to experience a sort of chicken-egg problem? Do you have sufficient credentialed faculty to take on additional students, to chair their doctoral committees, et cetera?
Yes, we believe we are well positioned to do that. Actually, using the hybrid approach, we'll be able to make the highest use of our faculty. We have doctorally prepared faculty on each campus, and in this fashion, we will be able to deliver the program that is needed for the students. We think we are the chicken.
Hey, you finally answered the question for me. All right, other questions?
Yeah. Hey, Rob, I have questions.
Yes, sir.
A couple questions I'd like to ask. This is Matt Baker from Texas Tech, and once again, a very well-written proposal. You're be commended for it. On page 9 of the proposal, you indicate you give 2 months' notice for the face-to-faces. My question from a student perspective, that's not very much. Having run a doctoral program very similar to this, our students anticipated like a 2-year window of notification so could build their busy professional calendars around those schedules.
Yes, that's an excellent point. And in fact, we have currently updated that to be a minimum of 3 months. We recognize the demands of people juggling their busy professional schedules and have a great deal of regard for that. The plan is in place, however, that we do communicate to the students that in the proposed program, the first workshop would occur the second week of the semester, and the second workshop would occur during the first week of December.
Okay, thank you very much. A couple of other questions, or very quick questions, or a comment. This one's on regards to page 17 and page 21 are the proposals. On page 17, you indicated all the faculty had gone through Quality Matters training. On page 21, you said most. And that's probably just a typo, but you might want to clarify that.
Yes, that was an oversight. Thank you for picking that up. All of our faculty have completed that at this point.
And my last comment is regarding the budget. You were either really creative or not. I'm not sure. I'll let you'll respond to that. But, you know, most of the time when we look at 2-year windows of no funding, we begin in a fall, spring, summer, and go another fall, spring, summer to go with the fiscal year. You came in here with a summer prior and have 1 semester only for the first year of funding that's showing in the budget, which was once again either very creative or not very creative. I'm not sure, and that's probably a staff issue. That was probably a staff issue and Van can address this at some point. But we've always instructed our graduate faculty working on the committees at Texas Tech to begin with the sequence fall, spring, summer for the first year and continue fall, spring, summer on the second year. So
I'm going to respond to that. This is Jennifer Martin, the Vice Provost. We have had other proposals that we had programs that began in the summer, and we were instructed by staff on those proposals that should be the first year because it was part of that academic year. So if that needs to be changed, we are very willing to do that. We simply followed what we had been instructed on previous proposals.
You were correct in what you did, Jennifer.
Okay, thank you.
that's all my questions. Thanks.
Other questions? No? All right, at this point, we'd ask that the representatives from Texas Women's University excuse themselves from the line. The way the process works from here out, we will discuss your proposal. We will vote on it. The results of that will be communicated to you by coordinating board staff.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank y'all.
Thank you for the kind comments. That's something that's very encouraging to people who have worked very hard on this. Thanks so much.
Thank you for making it easy to read. All right. Comments? Matt?
No, I just learned something. I didn't know we could do it like that, and very interesting in terms of the budget.
Yeah, understood.
That's really not germane. Another thing that I'm really amazed with is, and maybe this is typical and not typical, but it's not typical from my experience, is that they would require these working professionals, I'm assuming they're going to have a huge demand out of state, to come twice a semester, every semester. That is a heavy, heavy teaching load, or a heavy, heavy travel load, a very, very big expense on the students. Very commendable for the program because clearly they're trying to make sure that the students learn what they're supposed to learn. What I would recommend at some point that when we look at these rules and regs again, that we require some kind of cost
student burden
Spudenberg as part of these proposals, because that's, in the end, even though they're flying in from Houston, into Houston or Dallas, which is good, they're easy to get into. It's going to make the program very expensive for these students.
I don't disagree. I do think that that's offset somewhat by the profession, the chosen profession, and the general level of income in that profession. So. Other comments? Okay. I would entertain a motion to approve the Texas Woman University doctoral proposal in occupational therapy. Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. Who seconded? Thank you. All right. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Same sign. All right. Thank you all. We are on track for an 11:30 lunch. All right. At 1 o'clock, y'all give me a little feedback here. At 1 o'clock, we're going to have Russ Poulin from the Western Cooperative for Educational Technology come online and talk to us about the somewhat frightening set of rules coming out of the federal government regarding approval for supporting students from other states. If you're not aware of that, you will be at the end of the day, and you'll be appropriately frightened. WCET and Russ in particular have done a lot of, they're sort of leading the charge in terms of talking this up, hearing about it from other people, getting some cost impacts, and really trying to fashion a way forward for all of the states. So that's hard at 1 o'clock. We'll have lunch at 11:30. We have a couple of items beyond that. The main one.
Leave the one you were just talking
Yes.
about. Is there a website with kind of a summary of
Yes.
what they're proposing? Or?
Yes, and WCET's website, right on the front page. It's WICHE, WICHE .WCET dot.
One more time.
Yep. WICHE .WCET dot, what is it, NEDU? Are they NEDU? Org. .org.
Rob, I have a link to the actual PDF document, their starter list.
Excellent.
And the website. If I can send it to you or Van, you can send it around to everyone.
Actually, I have it. I
Okay.
have that.
For some reason I can't get online today, so
Very
anything you
good.
send me right
Thank you.
now, I won't get. Yeah. Yes. Right.
Yes.
Really good stuff.
Well, it's pretty fragmented when you look at
Scary.
applications at $5,000 to $6,000.
Yep. So,
Yeah, I just read the thing where, to see how many out-of-state students we had maybe
it is?
15 or 20
Wow.
different states tax-free.
It is witchy.edu, by the way.
I'll actually send the link
So,
to everyone.
just to put everybody on the same page so that we are prepped for the discussion at 1 o'clock, what you'll hear, there is a requirement that's actually, it's not a new requirement, it is now being enforced with some new clarity that says that if an institution who is housed in a state is offering education to a student who is located in another state, that institution should have the approval of that state, that student's home state, to offer them this instruction. Okay, we have never really approached this in any cohesive way. We've simply said onesie twosies coming into our online classes, nothing we have to worry about. If we were going to open an on-ground institution in that distant state, certainly we were going to go through this process. But it's been reinterpreted to say that even the onesie-twosie students who are in our class from Oklahoma, from Alaska, from North Dakota, we would need to go to Oklahoma, to Alaska, to North Dakota, and seek their approval to do that. One of the gotchas is each state's process has a wide variance in how we do that. Some are very simple. Here's a form and a filing fee. Some require a site visit. Then you get to pay the travel of the visitors. Some are simply prohibitively onerous to deal with, which is why New York is often looked at as the pinnacle of being difficult to work with in terms of getting that approval. So what Russ will talk to us about is the current state, that legislation in some detail. That discussion is going to take place at 1 o'clock. We're going to have lunch right here at 11:30. My question for you is, do we want to simply take an hour and a half for lunch, or do we want to try to knock some other work? We can start the discussion of the white paper and then table it and come back to that after Russ's presentation. But because he's coming in from Denver online, we can't move him around. That makes sense? I'm interested in your thoughts very quickly.
We don't take an hour and a half.
Got it. I agree with that. All right. Having said that, what time is it? It's 11:25. Lunch is going to be here at 11:30?
About 11:30, yes.
All right. What I propose then is that we let lunch sit until noon, that we start the discussion of the white paper. Is that amenable to everyone? All right. This is item 13. Discussion of draft white paper on the state of Texas distance education. Has everyone had a chance to review that document? Yes. All right. I first want to commend Ron and Patrick for leading this process, for producing this document. I think it is an excellent starting position as expressing essentially the state of the state / what the DEAC hopes will happen in the state of Texas. Thank you all both for your hard work and for corralling some cantankerous people on phone calls like me. I know.
You're always nice, Claudia. Just like you're always beautiful.
There you go. Yeah, life's getting better all the time. All right. As an opening, if I could ask Patrick and Ron to sort of lead us through the process, the document itself. We'll chat.
Sure. All right. First, I want to extend a thank you to the other committee members who provided input on this and served to help improve a document. Bill Alexander, Stephen Levy, Claudia McDonald, Antonio Renee, Rob Robinson, and Roy Bartels. Appreciate all of the input and support on what was an onerous task, but ultimately one that was fruitful, and hope you find it the same. Had some additional input come in via email that I've posted on the wiki, also from Matt, and we'll cover that. We want to let you know that though Ron and I were the lead authors on this, we are no way tied to anything that's in here, so we've kind of finished it and put it in front of you, so any and all comments are welcomed, and hopefully we can move forward with integrating those very quickly so that as the legislature is making decisions about the future of higher education, they can have input from this body. So to tell you a little bit with where we started on outlining what we would look at, we took the previous work of this committee and Texas DLA, who had identified critical issues in distance education, and kind of roughed in some of those as they applied to the coordinating report to the governor on cost efficiencies. And this white paper is really centered around integrating those two things, issues that we see and responding directly to what was found in that report. And what you'll notice, if you've read through it, one of the themes is on something that isn't necessarily just limited to distance education. It is about clear pathways for students to get degrees in order to realize efficiency. It's something I posted to the wiki, probably nobody's seen it yet. I just caught it over the weekend. It was an effort by Tennessee to do a lot of work with articulating pathways for degrees so that credit would transfer. And they started off with looking at 40-degree programs and articulating those through. And there they have two different university systems. I think they have around 13 public colleges, so it's not as onerous a task as we have in Texas, but they made a committed effort to begin with some degrees and realizing that that is a core value that we need to work on, is how do students get through without having to repeat courses, lose credit in between. So you'll notice throughout here transfer is mentioned as one of those things that we need to take on the challenge of working through and improving And I know that there is some work, I believe, with the undergraduate education committee of the coordinating board that is looking at learning outcomes for some of the core curriculum courses in an effort to promote that type of transfer work. So if we look on page 2 to the creating clear pathways for successful student outcomes, that's where we talk a bit about transfer needing to be improved. From there we go on to respond to the 10% requirement that Van mentioned at the top of the meeting and how that can be met. And we thought it also important to include not just 50% or more, which is our definition of hybrid and online, but also begin to capture those portions of courses that are delivered without seat time that are less than 50%. So even measuring 25% of a course that is delivered online, because cumulatively, let's say you have a student taking 3 courses in a semester, a third of each course is delivered online. That doesn't register at all towards meeting that 10% goal, yet a third of their instruction, 33%, not 10%, has been through an alternative format. So we think that it would be a good idea to look at better ways to measure and count those things if that's really what we're trying to bring to the students. In item B, meeting demand with new approaches to delivery, and there are several items under this. One of the recommendations is the development of an online delivery system for an associate degree. And there we point to the fact that the Virtual College of Texas is launching a new online degree and certificate program, and it currently will total 214 individual programs in 32 areas. And so we think that that may be something that the legislature should get behind, because we already have a mechanism going forward that can help provide that as an alternative to creating a new entity or new system for doing that. We think there's one that has a good chance of success. Looking at recommendation for a new type of institution. Here's one that we had a significant amount of discussion on when the committee met on a conference call about how closely we wanted to align with or examine the University of Maryland University College model. There was some acknowledgement that it doesn't, bless you, it doesn't really represent Texas culture and collaboration, and it requires a lot of integration between community colleges and the senior institutions that we don't see in Texas. So if it were something that we wanted to do, there would have to be a lot of work done to promote that type of collaboration that we don't currently see. So could be adapted, but we have to recognize the culture we're operating in. We also mentioned the Success by Degree program, which Van mentioned at the top of the meeting also, that is working to foster degree completion programs among various institutions to help promote those, to solicit students who have stopped out in the last 5 years, but who had significant credits. Moving on to the area of recommending e-textbooks and digital learning environments. We really lumped our response to 2 items here together. One was on looking at the efficacy of e-textbooks, and the other was looking at 3 different digital learning technologies, one being mobile computing, one being e-textbooks, and the other being open source, open content. And in this area, we kind of documented the things that Coordinating Board and others in Texas are doing in those 3 areas. What we noted here again is the need for institutional leadership and interinstitutional collaboration as a key for successful implementation of these items. And this kind of leads to the next area where we recommend the creation of a Higher Education Continuous Improvement Council. And it is to create a culture for the type of change that we're hearing the governor says needs to take place, that we're hearing from Commissioner Paredes, that we're going to have to do things differently. We're going to have to come at them differently, and it's going to have to come from a committee that can, or a body that can take action on it, not merely deliberate and discuss, but can actually take action. And so we describe what we think that body might do and what their goals and objectives should be. And it might look very much like a DEAC, because I feel like when I look around this table, I see a lot of folks who are agents for change, that think about things differently, and it's not gosh, I guess we can't do that, let's turn around and go home. It's okay, well, is there another way to approach this? And throughout this, we describe this culture of innovation and bringing together those who can make a difference and giving them some authority to begin to implement some of these changes and to talk across lines and to communicate up and down within their institutions so that we can come up with some of these solutions and they're not kind of coming in from left field from legislators who haven't heard these voices that sit around tables like these and discuss what could be instead of what's going to be because it's sent from on high. The next section, we talked about recommendation on best practices already in place in Texas, and we deliberated about whether or not to include some examples of innovation. One of the thoughts that I think, Matt, you expressed was if we list some but not all, then we're going to have our presidents and senior administration on our tail going, well, why didn't we get listed in this list? And I think that's a good and honorable thing to be concerned about. And we had just listed a couple there. I don't see that it could be exhaustive because there's a lot of folks that aren't represented in this room. So that's one of the points of discussion I think we really want to hear about folks from is how do we express adequately that there's a lot of good things that are going on here without leaving anybody out. And the third item under that area is a recommendation on expanding procurement pools. I think we all realize that each of us is buying things like licenses to Blackboard or eCollege or Luminate on a one-off basis. They have policies in place that you can't discuss pricing with the others, but I think that what we recognize is there are lots of areas where the state could be more involved in harnessing the volume that we do in Texas of purchasing these type of ed tech tools that we could get better prices than we're currently enjoying. And this could expand to publishers as well as to electronic system providers. And of note, and this is included in our response as well, is some of that type of collaboration that's taking place in the 63 public two-year colleges. And that's in large part due to Ron's work through Virtual College of Texas, bringing those folks together. And they have purchased software licenses to SoftChalk, Smarter Measures, Dallas Telelearning Digital Resource Repository, and those are things that all of those institutions get to take advantage of for a fraction of the price they would pay on a one-off basis. I'm not aware of those same type of consortial relationships among four-year institutions, but I think that's highly desirable. So the conclusion kind of restates the points that I've tried to summarize for, so I won't go over those again. At this point, I'd love to hear feedback from the full committee. Thank you. Ron, did you have anything to add before we?
Just a comment that, like many of you, when I first read the recommendations, et cetera, from the coordinating board, and I had been reading the various additions of that advisory committee that was input into the coordinating board's recommendation. First, I was really sort of taken aback, but it simply emerged through time. It dawned on me that change is going to happen, period. That's all there is to it. And so the issue is, do we be driven by the forces out there to change, or do you become the master of that and say, we will drive the change? And so that sort of thinking was really where Patrick and I were coming from. What do we want to happen? And I personally have really discovered that sometimes you get the right people together committed to move something forward, amazing things can happen. So that's, I think, where we were coming from.
Yeah.
Comments? Thoughts? Questions?
Yeah, I'll just jump in, Patrick.
Please.
First of all, I think you guys did about as good a job as any group could have done to kind of pull out the most salient points of the review that you were responding to and try to address them. Yeah, I think the secret here is succinct, succinct, succinct. We want people to read this, and if we elaborate just on and on and on and on, it's never going to be looked at, quite frankly. I don't think by the busy people we want to look at it. And so when we look at what you've written against that backdrop, my recommendation is this be a very short document, and it is. choose your words very carefully, which I think you've done. It needs some editing, obviously, but I think you're about there. You know, we all have the same concerns. You know, why do we worry about some of these things when, you know, when we already have a virtual college of Texas that we all know about? It's just like some people find out about these things and have been around for a long time. You know, we all have this angst that there's going to emerge a new university, a statewide university, as a result of this and other pushes. That'll be a digital university, and it'll compete against who we are. And I don't think we worry about things we can't control right now. We just try to provide good and accurate information and move forward. And Patrick, in terms of, you know, the examples, just, you know, I think we could, as far as possible, be institutional neutral in our responses. Just say at one Texas public university or one Texas school they're doing this or that or this. And once again, short, because if it's very long, I'm afraid it won't be looked at.
Agreed.
Thank you for that input.
On the report, a few of the things that concern me, one of them was on the e-textbooks, because right now that's not necessarily a good deal for our students. The assumption is it's great, but in practice, when you start running the numbers and a student can buy a paper book and sell it back at 50%, or get an e-textbook that expires at the end of the semester, even though they had to drop the course and now have to pay for the book again. You know, there were some assumptions on e-textbooks that I don't think everybody completely followed through with when they just made that assumption they're great. The other thing that concerns me on you know, the original minutes and report on cost efficiency about bringing in a new university or a new institution or creating a new entity, like, was it Indiana with the Western Governors? I think that was the example they used. I can't help but wonder if this isn't following some of the later comments by Michael, help me out, is it Michael Horn? That ringing bells? He's doing some sessions now on college disrupted.
Yeah.
I think it's Michael Horn.
Christensen? Disruptive technology?
Yes, and then Michael Horn, I think, is the one doing the, yeah, that's correct. And in that, they talk about if you're going to do something innovative, then you create an autonomous unit and have it do that. And I kind of wondered if maybe that's where some of these recommendations came from. But I think some of those lectures that he's done would be certainly worth a view by folks on this group to see where some of those talks are headed. But, you know, it kind of rubs me the wrong way that we have all these colleges and universities in Texas, and we would think about bringing in another institution just because we're too stuck in traditional ways to change our pedagogy, change our techniques, change our technology to address the modern student. So just a few of my feelings.
Thank you, Mark.
Kingston?
I also had a comment that relates to the e-book situation. Although there is a reference there to impact on student learning, I get the sense that the emphasis is on affordability. I think a usability study would also be of interest. My limited experience has been that affordability was far less of a concern than the actual reaction you got to the people who are expected to use the materials. For some reason, some people just don't seem to be interested in using them. And therefore, the impact on student learning would be linked to that usability aspect.
Thank you. Other thoughts?
Thank you.
Issues in general. What are there areas that you feel this document should cover that it did not? All right. Yes, sir.
I want to put this more as a question because it may have something to do with my own reading. I probably needed to reread it. Combining what is in this document with the material that we picked up from other sources, I just have a concern that seems to be a whole bunch of initiatives that are running in parallel. And I would have liked to see a very bold statement that perhaps sounds a word of warning against the risk of letting all these things run pretty much amok without a centralizing sort of harnessing process taking place.
Which, by the way, is a good role for the coordinating board. I agree, and I think, you know, there are some issues that are raised, echoing sort of what Mark was saying, about asking all institutions to step into this. You know, at my institution, we're really rehoning a mission which wouldn't be a tight fit with some of the activities and would absolutely be a tight fit with some of the activities. And so I do think that the idea, and I'm not saying our document does this, but I'm saying that our target audience may have this fundamental belief that in some way, shape, or form, higher education is a one-size-fits-all, and it's clearly not the case in this. I mean, look around the room, and you see the variety of institutions and the demographics that we serve. So how we formulate a set of activities in a position needs to encompass not only the goals of the state, but in some ways we need to make sure that we are that we do no damage to our own institutions, right? And so I can see two sides of, yes, you know, there needs to be a purpose-built institution to provide a very low-cost online bachelor's degree in the state. I'm not sure that some of our institutions would be further down the path, and that fits their mission, and some of us aren't. So I think how we formulate that. I think that the power of this is we're not really taking any stands other than clarifying what the legislators have already said. We agree, but. We agree, but. I think that's a really good place for this document to come down. Other thoughts?
I would just like to share this. You sent this to me, did you not? I did. There was one statement in here that just really grabbed me, and it's like, this is really what's driving everything. This is a report from, it says, Winning by Degrees, the Strategies of Highly Productive Higher Education Institutions by McKinsey and Company. This was the first time I had seen this report. Scott sent it to me, Marshall sent it to me right after we released the DEAC, the report you just read. But this statement, to produce 1 million more graduates a year by 2020 at today's levels of degree productivity, the United States would have to increase educational funding by $52 billion a year from its 2008 level of $301 billion. Such a funding increase is highly unlikely, as we all know. And that's really what's driving everything. The way we're doing things, we're not going to get there that way. But we don't want something, Patrick and I spent a lot of time talking about this, we don't want something from out of state or some private model to be imposed upon us. And back to what you're saying, just create something over here and let that happen independently, and we'll all follow. That was really disturbing to us. But that succinct paragraph of what would be needing to do what we would need in funding by 2020 by the current levels of productivity was really staggering.
Agreed.
And that document, by the way, thank you for saying that, Marshall. I went ahead and posted it when I received it on the wiki, so if anybody wants that reference, it is right under the link to the white paper draft.
Dan, let me ask, what is the arc of this document? I mean, where do we, assuming that the DEAC says this is the perfect summary of our current thinking, where does it go from there?
What we would do is we would take it forward, and I've already shared the draft with McGregor. We would take it forward to the Deputy Commissioner, David Gardner, and the Commissioner, Dr. Prethis, so for their information. How I would anticipate that we would end up using this is particularly, I think, as the discussion of a $10,000 bachelor's degree, and as the discussion of, for example, HB 1460 as it progresses, that this document then could be used for our informational purposes, and some of those things perhaps pulled out during testimony. And then certainly we would probably look at posting it to the website. I don't know if we would see this being directly shared with legislators. I think what it will do is inform our own discussions and our own policy recommendations. And for me, that becomes the really powerful way, because I frequently am called into conversations asking, what should we do? And this then becomes a tool for me to say, the group that is the most likely to know how to address these things has addressed that, and here's what they're recommending. So I think that becomes the way that we would use it. I think I would challenge y'all before we leave today and leave this conversation to think about what the arguments are that you would provide against the idea of a statewide online institution, particularly Western Governors or something like that. I understand and have heard your frustrations and your concern about somebody from the outside coming in. I don't know that for a legislator that's an argument that they would really entertain. And I think that is a discussion that we could see come up during this session, given that it was a part of the cost efficiency report. So I think it would be very wise for this body today to talk through specifically how you want to respond to that recommendation, because it sounds like that's the one that folks are having the most strong aversion to.
Clarify, are you saying for us to think about arguments against creating an extra Texas entity or something from another state?
I think both. I mean, I think that both of those things could both of those things were ideas that were floated in the cost efficiency study. And what I've heard, what I've seen in the white paper and what I've heard folks say today is that they don't think that either one of those is a very good idea. And if that's the case, I think it would be very wise for DEAC, before the day is over, to be very specific in crafting your argument about why you don't think either of those options would be a good idea.
Well, yeah, I'll just verbalize what many people in here have thought for a very long time, I'm sure, about some of these notions being floated around. The unintended consequence, the major unintended consequence of all this discussion is a two-tiered BS degree in the future. Oh, you went there. Well, that's not as good as the other. And that's clearly what would happen. I've no doubt about that. This whole Walmart U kind of philosophy, and that really made the Chronicle a few years ago of well, let's just give Walmart workers college credit for scanning. If they scan really fast, they get more college credit. I think at some point we need to speak very frankly about some of the unintended consequences that would happen. much less what would happen in terms of how they would pull resources away from existing institutions.
Well, and let me
Those are the big rocks in my opinion.
I don't disagree, and as a way to sort of catalyze the conversation, I think I have not heard enough clarity about some of these visions, right? Because to play devil's advocate, I do think that even if we take the sum total of the institutions in this state operating at our peak capacity and 20% beyond, we're still not coming anywhere close to meeting the needs in the state of Texas. We do have uneven capacity because some institutions are located where, you know, it's just hard to draw and fill the classrooms, and we have other institutions that are turning away at the door. But I think even if we were able to level that capacity out, it's not clear to me that meets the needs of the state. Certainly it doesn't meet the needs of the state in the Closing the Gaps document. And so again, as institutions define their mission, some of these activities that we're talking about, a $10,000 bachelor's degree, fall outside of the core mission of some of our institutions. Some of our institutions may be well placed to take advantage of that, maybe not hit that price point, but something close. So I think part of the clarity that we need to continually request when we're talking to the folks who are putting these questions forward is to really ask them to take the concepts a few steps further, and using as a touchstone that idea of unintended consequences, right? Because we certainly don't want to cannibalize our existing activities. We don't want to drain resources to support a new activity that may be off mission, but yet we're still not coming close to meeting the needs in the state of Texas. And so how do we as a group whose charge is we know how to do things at a distance, we know how to provide student services to students in an online or distance fashion, you know, how does that overlay us? There, did I catalyze? Uh-oh. Speak loudly.
I find it interesting that we, maybe not necessarily this committee, but prior to my coming to Texas, I was at Johnson C. Smith University in Charlotte, North Carolina. We had this very same conversation. Prior to that, I was at Lemoyne College in Memphis. We had the same conversation because of the unintended consequences. We can start just looking back a couple of years and think about what happened with the diploma mills that arose. And those who rose like phoenixes out of those ashes were the University of Phoenix.
Nicely done.
And Nova, and places, Nova Southeastern, and places like that. And as I look at what happened in Memphis, for example, and even though it's commercial, and even though you have entities now that are forming their own accrediting agencies, and they're offering society as it is today what's needed in order to move forward. And unfortunately, these accrediting agencies these programs are graduating students that are meeting those needs, and we will, you know, it does look like we might hit some of those benchmarks that have been laid out before us, but they're quickly leaving us, and they are taking the resources away from our institutions, and they are taking our students, and that's what we're competing against. And for the small school like a Wiley, or you know, we're looking at our students. It's difficult when 25% of your students are above the age of 30 in the workforce, and you're still offering a traditional program that they don't fit.
Right.
And so when you have a program like University of Phoenix that does that, these are things. While it hurts us, it's going to start attacking the larger institutions. And unfortunately, what I see is I see more of these institutions, governors, popping up around the country, and we're going to see.
Other thoughts?
One other item that was on my list and I forgot about was in reading through the cost efficiency report, it seemed that there was some language in there, or at very least some implication that this new online institution would be streamlined as far as student services go. So from our old SACS perspective, you know, I can remember when we tried to fire up the first DE programs, you had to have everything online. If you had a swimming pool, it had to be online. You had a cafeteria, it had to be online. You know, they wanted everything online. And now it sounds like from this report, they're saying, well, why don't we just cut all that stuff out and have very, very minimal student services for this new online institution. And I can see where that'd be a little bit of a conflict for some of us who have grown up with the concept, gee, you need to have more or less the same thing online as you do for your on-ground students as well.
Agreed. Other thoughts?
Well, you know, once again, I don't know, Ron, you know a lot more about this than I do, but, you know, why don't we be bold and just, if it makes sense to do so, you know, just say invest in what we have. We have a Virtual College of Texas. It's a very good organization from my perspective, and I don't know that much about it, but I've gone to your website. I've tried to use the services. It seems to work fine to me. You know, if we want to take the next step at the four-year level, then let's expand that thing. Let's you know, let's just lay it out in terms of, you know, we already have a mechanism in place. Let's just broaden that and do so, but let's not create or open the door for another for-profit to partner with something and come in and capture market share. And often what's forgotten in the University of Phoenix discussion is how expensive they are. Mm-hmm. And how really that is not a solution to people who can't afford our current system.
Yeah, and just to build on what, I mean, I think Matt's dead on with this. I mean, you really do create a tiered system, and it, you know, if we're trying to create access, you have to ask yourself, what are you providing access to? And if you look at the for-profit models that are out there, I mean, Phoenix got $1 billion in Pell money. At graduation rates between 5% and 8%. I mean, is that really the answer in the state? And I don't think it is. You also look at the Sloan C data about online enrollment nationally, and we all know 90% plus of all the online enrollments within 50 miles of a campus. And so I'm not so sure that this completely virtual senior level model is what we need to do either. I think it gets back to, if you want access, we've got models that work. Yes, they can be more efficient. And again, I'd really encourage you to look at the McKinsey report. I mean, some of the things we're doing, a lot of the things we're not, but we can all work a lot better, a lot more efficiently if we implement some of those things. But that's ultimately how you get access to degree completion. And that's what we've got to work on. I guess that's my cue. Is that
yes. Right? It's like the Oscars. You know?
There you go.
Play you off.
I want to thank the Academy.
I think
it is.
I think somebody put us on hold.
All about your music.
Yeah.
I'd like to make a comment just about making efficient what we currently do, I think is a big step of it. And that's the reason I was really impressed when I was reading the report to the governor, the number of times the issue of transfer kept coming up. Yep. And I eventually became convinced before I was through with this thing, well, let's fix that one, and we will increase our productivity and our efficiency by a significant %, that alone. Yep. So first steps are let's make what we've got now, put some emphasis there and making that work as productively, as efficiently as possible. And simultaneously start looking at some of these new models and how can we inside, working as community colleges and universities, cooperate and gain some of those same efficiencies, get the same outcomes, but do it because we develop it, we're managing it, we're driving it, creating it, as opposed to having another system imposed. I see no reason why it could not happen. But then I have been working with the Virtual College of Texas for 13 years,
And I have been amazed at what I see happen when you can get colleges and institutions aligned and say, let's do it. And we actually went through a SACS review that required 40 institutions completing a compliance certification in lockstep. And you would think that couldn't be done, but we did it. I just think there are a lot of opportunities internally that we can pursue and do it successfully if the right forces are aligned. That's my sermon.
I'd like to say that in the meantime, there are for-profit organizations that are knocking on the doors of various ones of us, and these things are happening, but it's on a one-at-a-time kind of experience. And it is, I agree with you also. This is something we could could have done a long time ago, still can do now if we want to, and create our own efficiencies and offer courses in whatever way we want to, and offer full degree palettes of programs in whatever way we want to. But I think our slow movement has allowed these entrepreneurs to come in. They see an opportunity, and various ones of us are looking for some. Well, we look around and we see others doing it in different ways, experimenting with pricing and experimenting with delivery methods, and meeting with acceptance and success, and it's causing different ones to take different actions. So things are happening. Change is going to happen, and if we don't do something, we're going to be sitting here, or the state will be sitting here 10 years, and change will have happened to us whether we controlled it or not.
Yeah, and I think, again, from the standpoint of policymakers and legislators, if we say, I think their first question is, okay, why aren't we, right? As an organization, as a set of institutions, why aren't we actively digging into these areas of efficiency and being entrepreneurial? And we have to have a cogent response. We can't say, well, we've always done it this way, or
Getting a start on that.
It's too hard.
Well, I mean, getting back to the issue of transfer, and I think it's somewhere in this report or somewhere else. I mean, it is a huge percentage of college credits that are earned that never count toward a degree.
That's correct.
It's a huge number, like a third or more.
That's correct.
And you think about the cost of those credits that never apply to a degree. I mean, a couple of things that are really impressive on the transfer front are CalPass in California, which is a magnificent system, and you ought to take a look at it. And the other one is a program in Alabama, of all places, called STARS, and they've got a statewide transfer articulation system. And universities can opt out of it. So if you don't want to take the credits from the community college, you don't have to, but it also means you don't get funded by the state. So there's a pretty big hammer on the other end if you want to opt out of that system. But if you're at any community college in Alabama and you want to transfer to any of the state universities, they've got to take your credits. And they've already worked out the articulation systems. Now, granted, Alabama is a much smaller state, but it's certainly something that would generate real efficiencies. It would be good public policy in the state to have that kind of a framework. I know the coordinating board's been very active in promoting these various transfer initiatives. UNT's got Youth Select, which is a step in the right direction. We're rolling out Youth Select. It will help. It's not the answer, but it does lead to some efficiencies, at least with our primary feeder schools.
Yeah, another thing I think we should think about is all of our institutions are spending way too much money on developmental education.
Yep.
If we had a statewide go-to organization for that would work in that capacity to bring students up to a sense of readiness, that would be a good use of, in my opinion, a good use of funds and a good thing to do. Because that would solve a lot of problems that exist later on or crop up later on.
Mentioning the developmental ed burden, if we can call it that, I know that our institution was asked to respond to a fiscal note related to House Bill 1244, which would require each institution to provide an online option for delivering developmental ed. And my first response was, so we're taking these students who are already at risk and placing them in a scenario that would require a great deal of extra support in order to succeed, versus some of the adaptive learning and other techniques which have been proven helpful, like Alex and so on. I don't think it's a good idea, but if you do, make sure you don't just count what it costs to develop the course, but all of those ancillary interventions that are very human intensive. So yeah, I think that's a challenge that we need to look at. How do we do that best? And I think there are models for doing it. My Math Lab, the Pearson product, is one that we've had success with. The Math Emporium model, many have experienced success with. But then at other places it has, I know we had a problem with, it was real interesting and we tried it, and then math department didn't really stay behind it. And so it was something that could have worked at other institutions, didn't work for us. So I think the developmental ed one, students aren't coming prepared, and there's a great expense with trying to get them up to speed while they're going through the college curriculum.
All right, I'm going to call a halt to the discussion, but we're not closing the discussion. I do want you to think back on this document. We will come back after we talk about the federal requirements and put a little more thought into this, figure out how we want to take this and move it forward. And as of now, have lunch. Come back ready to engage, to be back in session at 1 o'clock. I want to make sure, Russ, that you have plenty of time. If your schedule allows it, we can go the full hour from now, which I think it's roughly quarter after, if that'll work for you.
That works for me.
Okay. Okay. And we've got somebody here who's going to advance the slides manually as you talk. Let me introduce you to the folks here. We have on the line Russ Poulin. He is he's a Deputy Director of Research and Analysis at the Western Cooperative for Educational, it's just WCET, isn't it now? WICHE is a Western States Compact, but WCET in particular does a lot of deep research into the areas that are most particular to our interest. And over the course of the last year, Russ has really become a national expert on this particular issue, the new federal regulations on state authorization of distance education. And so, Russ, if you would share the good news and the bad news with us.
Why?
I hope you're still there. Are you there, Russ?
Yeah, he was bumped off.
Uh-oh. Did you just send an email?
Yeah.
He should call in again, because this will work. I know it will work.
Maybe we could just look at the slides.
Yeah.
And email him questions.
Yeah. Yeah. We may have to do it.
Didn't want him to talk about this subject.
Well, that phone probably has a
Powerful people.
Yeah, now we know what our students feel like.
Okay, somebody just came on.
Is that you, Russ? Hey, Russ. Let's hope this works. Are you still there?
I'm still here.
Yay. Well, you just missed a glorious introduction of yourself.
Oh, great.
All right, we're ready to work through your discussion and slides. We have somebody here to advance the slides whenever you want to give the say-so.
Okay, let's get going then. Thank you, Rob, and thank you everyone for the introduction and for asking me to talk here today. Sorry that we got mixed up on the phone there. We'll start off with a little bit about me, that on this state authorization issue, this is one of these things that when the regulations first came out, that I was looking at these regulations and started reading this one, and hadn't really heard much about it before, and
thought, well, this looks like it's going to have a really going to affect us in a big way as we look at this. And so ever since then, I've been keeping up on it and updating our web page and writing blogs about it. And then to this point now that found out that the Department of Ed has been referring people to me on our website on this. And so that's all been interesting. Let's move to the agenda for today. Just want to give you some background on who we are, and then what I'll do is go through the regulations and some of the language and make sure that you have links if you need to look at those later to find out or read it more in depth or to share it with others. And then I'll go through, there's some questions that seem to always come up in these conversations, and I'll go through those, but I want to save the bulk of the time for questions with you. So let's move to the next slide, which is about my organization. And we were founded by WICHE, the Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education, which is the sister organization to SREB in the South. And we were founded in 1989, and we focus on educational technology and distance education issues. And while we were founded in the West, that we have members, and if you go to the next page, you'll see our members, that we have members throughout the U.S. and in Canada, and we've gone beyond just being in the West these days, and so we represent quite a number of institutions. And thank you to those institutions that are listed there, because by through your membership and supporting what we're doing, that we're able to provide this information, and much better we're able to provide free on our website and through the blog, and then we provide additional updates to our members. Well, let's get into it. Let's go ahead and move to the next slide on program integrity rules, regulations. And this all had its genesis in the Higher Education Authorization Act in 2008. And I think most of you know that Congress every several years comes back and reviews all the language it has in terms of regulations for higher education and its relationship, the federal government with higher education. And higher education isn't federalized in the U.S., and so you get into these complex rules of working with the states, and what are the rules for financial aid. And so out of that there were two, what happens is the Department of Education needs to then take that language and then needs to interpret it in terms of what regulations will it make, and how will it enforce the language that is in the bill that is passed and then signed by the President in the Higher Ed Opportunity Act. And so they go through what they were called these rulemaking processes, and there were two of these this time. And this language was in the second group of rulemaking process called the Program Integrity Regulations, which tended to focus mostly on financial aid types of issues. And so what happened is that the Department of Ed posted in June 18th that you see there some proposed language of what they would be doing in a number of areas in these regulations. There were a large number of comments, and WCT and many other organizations commented on those. And then in late October, the final version of those regulations came out. And so they look at the comments and then make revisions and then print the final regulations. The problem with this, for this particular issue, before we get too deep into it, was that for this state authorization issue, that there was language about state authorization that was proposed, but it said it was silent on distance education. Because some of the comments said that they should say something about it, we ended up with the language that we'll be looking at here, that ended up being put in as a final regulation without any ability for institutions to comment on what the impact of that would be. And so that's rather unfortunate, and it's part of why we're sort of saying that this either needs to be rescinded, or there needs to be a delay in implementing this, because it was, we think, brought in, there were some false assumptions that all institutions were already doing this stuff. So, well, let's get into the wording here. So on the next one, in state authorization here, that I underlined federal programs there, and you can see that wording. And so that's talking about financial programs. And so we're talking about financial aid would be, again, that was what this was focused on. But any of this, we're looking at financial programs that could have an impact, and we'll talk more about this later, on any federal funds that you receive. And note down there that I'm quoting Fred Sellers from the U.S. Department of Education. He's a fellow I've been working closely with, who wrote these regulations and is the guy who ends up interpreting these for us. And so if I mention his name, we did a webcast with him, and the webcast is archived on our website. That was done back in December. And then he's also the one who's working on clarifications on this issue. Let's move to the next page on distance education. And here is the wording that was put in, and that this, looking at especially at the underlined parts, that this looks at distance ed in a state in which you're not physically located. And that's one of those frequently asked questions about what does that mean, or what does presence mean, or those sorts of things. And we'll get into that a little bit more deeply. But that you must meet the state requirements in each of those states in which you're serving students. And you must be able to document that upon request from the Department of Education. Let's move into the next one on distance education. This is another part of the language that was in the what was released back in October, that again operating in another state, but also wanted to point out about reciprocal agreements seem to work, and we'll come back to that in a little bit more depth there. So I wanted you to have the language that was there and get into, on the next slide, on students filing complaints, that this is another related part to this, that there is this requirement that institutions be able to, or that institutions give to students when they enroll in courses, both for the accrediting agency for your institution, and then also for the state in which the student is located, and we'll talk more about that, that you be able to provide some third-party place where they can file complaints. It's my understanding that they're not talking about, everybody has their internal institutional complaint process, but they're talking about external places. Now, the interesting thing about that is not every state has a complaint process, so some of them are scrambling now to try to create such a thing and get those going. But this is something that I need to look into this more, but this might also be a requirement for on-campus students as well, and I don't know that I've heard people talk about that, but I need to really look at that. Let's go to the next slide, and so I'm sure that you're all as clear as this picture right now in terms of looking at this, in terms of what works and where do you go and what happens. And so I'll go through and try to answer some of the few things. And so let's move to the next slide about where did this come from and why are they doing this. That really, to be honest with you, a lot of this came out of some of what the Department of Education and Congress was doing in terms of looking at accreditation over the last few years. That if you go back even to the previous administration, that there's been a lot of questions about the role of accreditation and how good is accreditation doing in fulfilling its role. So you've been seeing that. There's been questions about for-profit institutions, and sometimes the terms for-profit and distance ed get smucked together in the minds of some Department of Ed people and Congress people or senators or congressmen when you see them talking, that they put those together. So there's been this look at accreditation and nonprofits in those in the past years, and I really believe that a lot of this language came out of trying to clarify who has what role there, and that idea of a triad is one I remember hearing years ago, but hadn't heard much lately. But the idea here is that what Department of Ed is trying to do is say that on quality issues that it's up to the accreditors to look at the quality of higher education for the institution. The states need to take more of a business approach and consumer approach, and can the institution operate as a business in that state, and those sorts of issues, although a lot of the state approval regulations really look a lot like quality control more than consumer protection. So they were looking at those two roles, that accreditation and state approval, that the institution would go through those and that they would be approved in each of those areas. And then based upon that, the Department of Education would then grant financial aid to students who were at institutions who met those requirements. And that's an oversimplification of all this, but this is their idea. Now, the problem with that is that we've gone through decades now of a situation where many public and a lot of nonprofit institutions have operated in states, and they have not sought the approval of those states. And on the other side, it's hard for me to think of a time where a state has gone after especially a public institution, and most nonprofit institutions operating in those states hasn't really chased after them and said, you need to apply. So we have a situation where this has been going on for decades, and suddenly we need to try to resolve this. It's not something that the states have asked for. They have not asked for this regulation. So let's move on to the next slide. And this whole notion of operating, remember that in the regulations that we were talking about before, it said, in a state in which you're not physically located. Well, what the Department of Education has done is said that they're not going to worry about the definition of operating, and they're not going to come up with one. Oh, we're going to get to hear the train going by here. We're right by the train tracks, and so you're going to get to hear the horn there. There it goes. So I apologize for that. But safety on the roads. One more time. And so the operating, what does that mean? That's left up to each of the states. And so that's very good for allowing the states to have their say in this, but it creates a real problem for institutions because states are all over the map. It just makes sense that there's 50 different states, and they wrote their laws separately in terms of this issue. And so what would create again, they're all over the map. And so on this physical presence issue, that this is something that's often used, and a term that's used quite a bit. And it's quite obvious that if you've rented a building or bought a building and are there in the city and in the state, and that's quite obvious that it's physical presence. But there are other things that aren't quite as obvious and I've listed a couple here. But if you have a mailing address or a phone number in the state, or I was just reading one regulation that said if your server is in the state, now we're going into the cloud, where are servers, right? I thought that was a funny one. And then that we look at some of these, and something as small as requiring a student to take a proctored test in the state, that could be something. And then this list that I have here is just a sample of some of those, and that they vary from state to state. And for one state, it may be you do just one of those, and then you suddenly have to apply. For another state, that you may have to do several of those in order to get in. And so it becomes tough for the institution that you have to start looking at a wide variety of states in terms of where you have to apply or not. So with that, so now you have to need to look at all these states. Let's look at the next slide. Is there a state-by-state list? Well, the Department of Ed says that they're not going to create one because they think that's outside their jurisdiction, and then they thought that they would try to create one and then ran into problems with the Government Accounting Office and all sorts of things. So WCT, along with SREB, been working with Bruce and Mike at SRB, and thanks to them quite a bit, and the other folks that you see there, that we've worked together. And we've created this list that came out in January, and later today, this is next week, but our plan is that later today that we'll send out a revised list, because we looked at all 50 states. We sent it out and received responses back from 40 of the states in terms of updating us. And so this will at least get you going, looking at it. And it sounds like SHEO, the State Higher Education Executive Officers, will probably take this on and make a more extensive list with more questions in it, and we'll update it over time. So we're excited about that. That's something that I'm hoping is announced very soon. But at least there's a place where you can start looking. So let's move to the next slide. Again, back to operating on this, that when we looked at this, we, again, are saying that it differs by state, and we did a very gross generalization here and let you understand that we came up with the red, green, orange categories here, where the red means for those states that it's hard to think of a situation in which you wouldn't have to apply, and nearly every institution will have to apply their the green, that there's several states where they either have no regulations, or if you're just teaching online, that you don't have to apply, and those are the types of states that fit into that. And then the other 38 states and the District of Columbia, that it depends on the combination of what the laws are for that state and what activities that you're doing to that state. So that goes back to that list 2 slides ago, that you need to look at the physical presence rules for that state and then try to figure out how do you fit into that state and see if you fit in. So that's a lot of looking at regulations on this. So let's move to the next slide. What's the deadline? July 1st is the deadline. And so for distance education, that what I've been told at least is that you're supposed to have got approval, or what I was also told was that they've come up with this wording about if you've at least applied by July 1st, that they'll take that as applied in the state, that they'll take that as a good faith effort on your part. Because in talking with this Fred Sellers, I pointed out to him in early January, I said, well, you know that in some of these states that they're saying that their process takes 9 to 12 months. So even if even if an institution would have applied on January 1st, that there's no way they would have made it for that state. So he's come up with that wording. I have it in one of my blogs, and we'll get you the blog address a little bit later on, that I have the wording he gave to me. This wording is supposed to come out there's a Dear Colleague letter, and a Dear Colleague letter is something where the Department of Ed puts out clarifications on questions that they get about their regulations. And that's supposed to be coming in January. It didn't come in January. It's supposed to be coming in February, and it's February 28th. It hasn't come yet. So we're not quite sure when it's coming. But the official wording on that and some other things are supposed to be coming out in that Dear Colleague letter. But meanwhile, I believe, Fred, that they will take that as good faith, but that ends up being a problem. You still have to apply in all these places where you need to apply. And I should say, and about applying, I should say, for a lot of you, there's probably quite a number of states where probably over half the states where you probably end up not having to apply. I don't mean to say that you're going to end up having to apply to all 50 states, because it'll end up that in several of these states where the things that you're doing, that you're not advertising locally, you're not having local proctors, you're not doing any of the things that trigger in some of those states, so you probably won't have to apply there at all. So let's move to the next slide, and remember that I've talked about reciprocal agreements, and then just this morning Bruce Chalou from SREB and I have been exchanging emails on the electronic campus. We both have questions into the Department of Education about, well, exactly what type of reciprocal agreements work or do not work, because we are seeing different things in the regulations where we're not quite clear exactly what will work. And I found some language today where I think it was trying to clarify it, but we're thinking that the electronic campus works, but we're not positive on that. And so we're hoping to get some clarification on that soon. And so we're hoping that will come out in this Dear Colleague letter as well. So there is a lot of possibility. I think a lot of hope out of this that if they don't ever rescind these rules, and there are things going on even today about trying to get these rules rescinded, get rid of these rules, that there's ways that we can work together across states to come up with reciprocal agreements to make it a lot easier, especially on public institutions. So almost to the end of my slides here. Let's move on to the compliance. Again, what you'll have to do is apply in the states where you would need to apply. The states are supposed to create a list of all the institutions that they've approved and are supposed to give that to the federal government upon request or have it on their website, and so where they can easily find it. And then this is not something that the institution has to provide to the U.S. Department of Ed. There's no requirement for that, but it's just upon request. And so where that would come up would be if there's a financial aid program review or an audit of your financial aid program, they would expect you to have complied with all the states in which you're serving students, in which you're operating. If a complaint comes up from a state and that gets all the way to the federal government somehow, and that they're investigating that complaint, and it turns out that you're not in compliance in that state, that could be bad. And the other is that I guess in financial aid terms, and I'm not a financial aid person, but there are times where there get to be discussions between the feds and the financial aid officers where they ask for documentation on things, and this might come up at times. And so you don't have to prove anything, and I guess you could take the chance that you won't be found out right away, but that's up to you and your risk-taking abilities and sensibilities. Let's move on to the next slide. We're finding more information. I mentioned that I've been keeping up this state approval website, and that's where you can find these a link to the document that we'll be posting with the state-by-state list. You can find links to the blogs that I put out there, or you can look at the blog, and I've been putting out a blog about every other week with updates on different aspects of this. But I'm hoping that the state approval page gives you a quick background on this as well. And anyone can register for the blog, whether they're a WCT member or not. If you're a WCT member, that we have a listserv, and I'm sending things out on the listserv that are updating people about where we're at. And so with that, I'm ready to go to questions, and I hope people are still there and not sleeping too much. So let's go to questions.
All right, thanks, Russ. It's a good overview. I know we're going to have some questions. I'm going to stick mine in first because everyone else is jumping at the microphone. I don't want to put you on the spot as making pronouncements, but what's your best read as to the potential for revocation of these rules? You personally, Russ.
Me personally. Well, I tell you that today I think it'll be today or tomorrow at the latest, that we have signed on to a letter by ACE, American Council on Education, that they put together, and several other organizations, and I don't know what the final count is, that we've signed on asking for revocation of these. In talking to the Department of Ed folks, that they're saying that these are final regulations, and final is final, And this is talking everywhere down to Fred Sellers, who's rather low down there, up to Assistant Secretary Ochoa, who's rather high up, and people in between, that they're saying it's not going to have it, that they're planning to move forward. That's everything that we've heard from, and so we're saying that we're needing to go to Congress and to get some pressure coming from that side, and especially good would be to try to get Democrats to try to, in Congress, to try to pressure the Department of Ed to do something about this. We also are working on another letter. We're in partnership with SREB that we'll be putting out to our member institutions, I'm hoping later this week, where we'll ask institutions to contact their congressional delegations on this, and the wording isn't final on that. I think we'll probably end up asking either for a rescission or for a 2-year delay on this, because I think we can come up with some reciprocal agreements on this. And so, we need the help of institutions giving story, contacting their congressional delegations, letting them know this is a huge problem and that something needs to be done. Because and I'll get to your question now after all that background, I talked to one of the senior staffers on the Senate committee that deals with education, and he said they've heard almost nothing on this issue. So if Congress is hearing almost nothing on this issue, the big Senate committee that would work on that is hearing almost nothing, that as of right now, that there's little likelihood that anything will change. But we're hoping that through these two efforts and getting people going and contacting the Congress people, that something could happen. And I, for one, think there's a little battle going on about whether we should ask for rescinding this or whether we should ask for a delay on this. And I'm more in the camp that I think that we should ask for rescission but be happy with the delay, because I think it's going to be really hard now that they brought up this issue. It's going to be really hard for the Department of Ed to back off of requiring institutions to go by state law. So that's where we're at. So let's see, what would be my guess on this? If I had to guess, I would think that there would probably be a delay that will come out probably sometime, but I would imagine it would be at least a month before we would hear about that. Unfortunately, now we're enrolling students already, so it's not fun.
Okay, great. I'm going to open it up to the rest of the group. Just to reduce feedback, if you're not talking, turn off your microphone, and if you are, have yours on. Okay, go.
Hey, Russ, Matt Baker from Texas Tech. How are you today?
I'm doing well.
Okay, thanks for the presentation. Russ, from an institution's perspective, there are at least two organizations going through with policy analysis, your group and the larger group that you're working with in EduVentures. There are probably others doing the same thing. The lists aren't consistent in terms of what one group of policy analysis are saying about a particular state versus another. From an institution's perspective, what advice would you give?
Oh, in terms of looking at the list?
At looking at the list that you came out with versus other lists that are out there that are very different.
Yeah, we've been working with that. We didn't know EduVentures was doing their list, even though I had put out all sorts of feelers about this, and had reason I ended up with a partnership was I was trying to pull in all the groups that were doing it, so we wouldn't end up with separate lists. But the things that we're looking to the future, then I'll get back to your question. So I'm really glad to see. I really hope that SHIO takes us on and makes the definitive list so that we really have that. Unfortunately, that isn't going to. They aren't going to have anything for a while that other than what we have. What I would do is take our list. Now, the one that is coming out today, that we actually sent that out to the 40 states, and so or we sent it out to 50 states and got feedback from 40 of them, and so we feel pretty good about probably about 30 or 35 of those. Some of them provide pretty poor feedback, actually, on that. So we're feeling pretty good that we have good feedback on most of those states that have feedback from us. So, and our purpose was just to get you started and get the contacts, and you're going to have to do a lot of this on your own and trying to figure out, because it does get down to this combination of what are the state regulations and what is it that you're doing in that state, and how do those two things come together. So it gets really hard in terms of creating an overall list, in terms of trying to anticipate all the different combinations that those could be. I've always referenced EduVenture's list because I think if you have somebody who's really looking at this, and we've got a couple other documents that we reference as well, I think if you have somebody really looking at this, that they need to look at it, pick one that they're going to go with, but double check, if they ever have doubt, to go double check on the other list to see, are they saying the same thing?
Okay, thank you.
This is Paula Nichols from Lamar University. Most states, when they're contacted, say that no approval is required. What kind of documentation are we expected to have for those states?
Well, this is the problem where the U.S. Department of Education is not creating a list, because it wasn't their intent that you get a letter from each of those states. However, that institutions, in terms of making sure that they're able to document this, are going to those states and now asking for those sorts of letters. So we really do need some sort of list that says, if you're doing some sort of list that says, if you're doing this, this, and this within a state, that you don't need to apply there, and you don't need to you don't need to have a letter from them. But we don't have that. So failing that, I think institutions need to do a couple of things. First, that since we started this effort and bugged the states all the heck the last few weeks here, we've noticed that some states like South Carolina and Georgia and North Dakota, I think there's some others, have done a really good job where they've put up letters that address this issue pretty straightforward. So I think in those, my advice, I'm not a lawyer, is that I think in those states where the state agencies have done that you're probably pretty good by using that letter and going with it, and then showing how, and then you probably want some documentation on your side too about why you fit into the exemptions or the reasons why you don't have to apply in those states. Otherwise, I'd start bugging those states as well and start asking for either that they post such a letter, or that they look at your situation and give you a letter saying that you don't have to apply in that state. And I'm hoping that will start having more of them start putting up letters that say that are much clearer about who or who does not comply. But meanwhile, if this doesn't go away, you need to document all of your conversations with all of the states to show that you have tried to find this out, and the efforts that you went through to try to figure it out.
I've just come off of a pain with about a 6-month project of contacting all 50 states. And so I am speaking from experience here. There's a lot of problem in identifying the entity that actually has that power in each state. Every title is different. There's no state focus on the state website to identify that entity. If you're dealing with education, some of their programs may come under one entity and some under another. You've got a problem of locating the individual that actually is the person that has the power to tell you that, and get. I've got probably 8 states that I never heard back from. Compound that, we've had a change of government. named your party in several states, and the person who was in. So it's very difficult, time-consuming to go through that. What are we supposed to do with out-of-state students that we currently have? One here, one there. Are we supposed to kick them out?
Well, first, I feel your pain on the first part of that, because that's exactly what we've been doing, and you are correct that we are put down an insane road on this here. This doesn't make any sense. This is why we really need to try to get a rescission or a delay at the least. As far as students who are already enrolled, that there is no wording anywhere that I've found that grandfathers anybody in, that it all talks about just that you need to be in compliance by July 1st. And so what does that mean for students in those states? That's a horrible impact. I guess you're supposed to kick them out or not serve them or come to an agreement with the state somehow that either you need to teach out those students or that you're in the middle of applying. So you need to do something with that state in order to as to how you can apply with them. Now, remember, I didn't write these regulations, but this is what I'm hearing, just that you need to comply by July 1st.
Okay, thank you.
Russ, this is Van Davis over at the coordinating board. I want to ask sort of a follow-up to what Paula just asked. I had a conversation with the provost from one of our institutions last week that is grappling with that very issue. They have students in an online degree program from one state. The requirements of that state are such that they do not think they'll be able to meet them because of the financial issues involved in meeting them. And the question he posed to me was, does this mean that we have to just remove these students from our program even though they are part of the way through our program? And my response to him was, I don't know. You're going to have to talk to that state. Is there any better advice that you think that I could give him as he and some of our other institutions run into this very problem with some states where the requirements just are such that it's not feasible for them to do it, but they already have students in their online programs making progress towards a degree?
I think you should do everything you can to work with that state to, you probably won't change their application rules, that's probably not it, but can you come up with some sort of agreement to take these students and get them to completion, because they are the residents of that student. You've come forward and said that that you want to work with those students and help those residents. Is there some sort of agreement that you can come to so that you can complete those students in a reasonable time? And this reminds me that I need to look this up, but there is remember I said there was 2 rounds of rulemaking, but I believe in the first round of rulemaking there was something about a teach-out provision, meaning that if you were going to, it was more at institutions that were closing or that were closing a program or something like that, there's supposed to be some reasonable attempt to try to allow those students to complete. Well, so now you're put at odds between 2 federal regulations where you say you can't operate in the state, but yet you have to try to get them to complete. Now, whether the states are overwhelmed right now, in the state regulatory people, and so whether they'll want to talk to you or not, I don't know. I think, again, I would document everything that I could on that and show that you've made every reasonable attempt to try to do this. And you'd have to talk to your lawyers. My heart tells me, try to side all you can on the side of students, but yet I'm not your lawyer, and I don't know how much risk that's going to be up to the institution as to how much risk that they want to assume on any of this. And remember that the Department of Ed says that they're not going out and actively seeking institutions that are in violation of this. It's only that if they happen to learn about it through those methods I mentioned before, that they would come after you. I wish I could provide better answers to this stuff.
Yeah, Russ, I've got a question related to that. I'm not sure I was able to follow everything that you just explained about who might be trying to enforce this, but looking on one of the WCET, one of your frequently asked question pages about this, when it asks what is the penalty if my institution does not comply with these regulations, it says, presumably students studying in states in which your institution does not have approval will not be eligible for federal financial aid, which to me doesn't seem like much of a penalty. That doesn't talk about people coming after us. That makes me think that some federal offices somewhere, at least 2 or 3, are going to have to get together and double check whose financial aid application came in with a letter. It seems like it's impossible to prosecute. And if that's the only penalty, but that's the only one I'm able to keep up with. I think you said some other things that made it sound like it may be breaking a law, and they may come after us with, some kind of punishment or something.
Or you
but
might be eligible for Title IV funds.
For the Title IV funds.
It's an institutional issue.
It's an institutional issue, correct.
So, well, this frequently asked question answered might not be as severe as what it really is then.
Well, and I believe it was in the webcast that Fred had talked about this, that and remember that they'll probably only find this if you get, if you're one of the, I think it's 300 institutions they're doing this year that undergo a federal financial aid program review or audit that they would be doing. So what could happen to you would be that if you're out of compliance, that it's probably most likely that the students wouldn't be eligible, and plus they would probably ask for whatever federal financial funds that you've given to those students to be repaid. And I'm saying that based upon, I've been watching what the Department of Education has been doing in a whole other rule in terms of last day of attendance, and that's what they've been doing, is that they go back, and if students are deemed out of compliance, that they want all the federal funds that were given to those students. And then Fred said something else too about if you're seen to be as egregious in not looking at this. Let's say that you applied to no state, that you have no documentation that you worked with any state to try to do anything, that the implications could be more severe, including putting your financial aid program at risk or other federal funds. But it sounded like that would be if you really just did nothing about this at all, that there is the possibility for greater risk, but you have to really have blown it.
Russ, this is Paula Nichols again, but I know you're aware of our staffing issues and budget issues in the state of Texas, and we're not as bad off as some people. But Georgia, in particular, requires, the application is 71 pages long, including instructions. And when I looked at it, it was at least a $5,000 initial investment. It makes it very difficult for states or any institution, particularly a smaller institution, to meet that kind of thing. It's very time-consuming staff-wise and also very expensive. Are the feds or whoever is thinking about enforcing this so hard thinking about that?
Well, if you go back and read the regulations that were put out in late October, that these sorts of questions were raised in the comments about the regulations that came out. And remember that this distance ed one specifically wasn't in the comment period, but what they talked about, it's funny if it weren't so sad, to read in hindsight that they say that there should be no financial burden on either the states or on the institutions to do this, because they will have already done all of this. And it's only a few institutions who haven't followed these rules who would have any sort of costs on this. Well, it shows that they were at least at that time when they wrote that they were really out of touch with what the reality was out there in the world. And so I agree with you. I've talked to one for-profit institution. They have 4 people who do this. This is what they do, is that they follow state regulations and they're making sure that their institution is up to speed, and they're filling out all these 71-page applications. Yeah, it's raised a really interesting question with SHIO in terms of that they are interested. Again, the state higher education executive officers, so the heads of system offices, are on that in terms of looking at those regulations and saying, does it make any sense that you have this huge process for both accreditation and for these state regulations? And while this is a question that won't be answered for many years down the road, that at least somebody thought to raise that question. But I don't know what a small community college is going to do to try to do this. That we're coming out with a proposal that institutions work together within their system to. It doesn't make sense for each institution to have an expert on the regulations of all 50 states. So, is there a way that institutions can work together within a system to help each other?
It's also a changing landscape because many states are tightening their regulations and making it more difficult because of their experience with the for-profits.
And I think
several states where either higher education itself is completely being reworked, like Connecticut and Maryland, or that there have legislation or reviews of the regulations going on at this point. So while you're doing all this, that these regulations are changing. It makes it even more fun.
And I have a fear that given all states are scrambling for $1, that some states are going to look at this as a potential source of revenue and just greatly increase the cost of coming into compliance with their state.
I've heard that in 2 states. I'm hoping that others don't follow through, but I think it was Utah and Maryland, where I don't know that they've imposed any new fees, but they were talked about either raising fees or putting in additional fees.
Russ, another question. I thought I heard you say at the beginning of your presentation that the states didn't ask for this.
Correct.
And you just mentioned 2 states that I think they might be able to take advantage of it. That would mean a whole lot don't. Is there any kind of organized effort by you guys or anyone else to have like a national petition against this whole thing?
Yes, yeah, the 2 things. So we signed on to that ACE letter, and that letter was one where they wanted only organizations, not institutions, to be signatories on that, and they were the ones running it, and they had their own reasons for doing that, and so that's what they did. We are working again with SREB on some letters where we're going to send out to all our members and get other organizations to send out to their members. And what we're really asking, what we'll be asking institutions to do is to contact their congressional delegations and let them know a negative impact, especially on students, because that's what's going to hit them. So if you can imagine talking to a senator saying, well, look, we have a program that serves students in 38 states, and now we're going to have to pull back and serve only in 12 states. And does that, and to what end? Why are we doing this? What benefit has come out of this other than harming those students? Or the other alternative is that to pay all these fees in order to do this, that we're going to have to add an additional fee onto the students. We'll serve the students in those 38 states. They just have to pay $1,000 more a year for that privilege.
I'm Claudia McDonald. I'm from Texas A&M in Corpus Christi, and I have a couple of questions. When we're talking about the students that are out of state, is this every single student that is out of state that might be taking a course at my university, i.e. I'm talking about students that are enrolled in in a regular program and they go home for the summer and they take English 302 while they're at home, or they're in the United States military and they are transferred around the United States or are on temporary duty and living in another state in some way. In other words, there are students who deliberately choose an institution that live in Massachusetts and choose a Texas institution. Are they in one category, or is it every single student, regardless of the circumstances, that's in another state?
During the webcast that we had with Fred Sellers in December, there were, we really filled that chat room there, and he found that very helpful because we gave him all the questions that we had, and I categorized these questions, and we had a whole number of questions around military students and also ones about what I labeled transient students, or students who, even though the example that you gave where the student goes and takes one course while they're at home for the summer, that I put that under the transient category because they weren't all completely at your institution face to face. And he punted on those questions. And so he's supposed to be answering those questions about what to do with those military and those students who go back and forth across state lines. He's supposed to be answering those in this Dear Colleague letter that is supposed to be coming out. And again, I was satisfied with that because he said it was supposed to come out in mid-January, but it hasn't come out yet. And so I've talked to Fred a few times, and I don't know where he's going with that. What I fear, my worst fear, is that the answer that will come back will be, well, it'll be up to the states to do that, and then we'll be back to, well, what does that mean? Or how do we do that, or how do we do that for one student, or one student taking one course at a time? And so that's my fear. I'm hoping that he'll step up and come up with a better answer than that.
You know, one of the things that I've tried to listen, and I have to admit, maybe I'm being very blonde here. I don't understand why this started. I mean, and somewhere I missed that. Is this part of Obama's create jobs opportunities so that there are more state bureaucrats with something to do across all these states? Or, I mean, why did this really start?
Well, this is at odds with a whole bunch of priorities within the Obama administration. And so that may be one of our best things to keep pointing to, because if you're pulling back on serving students, how is that helping with the 2020 goals of trying to increase the completion rates in this country and the number of graduates that you have in this country? Well, it doesn't help it at all. But the whys go back to there was this all this discussion about the accrediting agencies and the for-profit institutions, and how are the states and the accrediting agencies regulating these for-profits. It came out that states, even in the for-profit area, were not always doing the job that they were supposed to do in that triad that I showed you before. That there was the expectation that accreditors would look at quality, and that the states would look at the consumer protection for the students going to those institutions. And so out of that, they came up with this regulation that I believe was really aimed at the for-profits. They wanted to make sure that the for-profits were being approved by each of the states. And then what they didn't look at was the fact that most public and nonprofit institutions have not gone by the state regulations. And so I think they ended up with a target of the for-profit institutions and ended up hitting the public and nonprofit institutions right between the eyes.
Okay, we have time for maybe one or two more questions. So, folks, jump in. this side of the table.
Yeah, my question is really, I may have missed it without having read all the documentation. I'm curious to know if there's any place one could go to see if there's any data, preliminary studies that may have been done to determine potential financial implications for institutions.
Let's see, if you go to the blog that I put out there, that just this last week, I had one institution in North Dakota did a quick study, in that they were serving students in 48 states, and it was somewhere around $160,000 just in initial fees. That doesn't include staff time. That doesn't include travel to states to talk to the bureaucrats in those states who are working on that. That was just in the fees. Their friends in Minnesota looked at that, and they took the same methodology, and the Minnesota State Colleges and Universities applied the same methodology. And again, it's not a complete study, but just a quick, a little bit more than back of the envelope kind of number. But they came up with $5.5 million for their 32 institutions, just in fees again. And so we've been using that number a lot in terms of saying, you know, we're talking about real money in an economic downturn, and that doesn't include staff time. So this is not a insignificant thing.
Do you know if, this is Claudia McDonald again, do you know if the governors across the country have annual meetings, whether they're Democrat or Republican? Do you know if they have addressed this issue in some way? Because it seems like if the governors would just simply agree that state schools would not have to comply with this, or they'd make the compliance, whatever you call it, the agreements that we are compact among all the states, and then bring it back through their legislature, that, you know, the federal government can go out there and do whatever they like if we all say we're going to let students go from state to state.
Yeah, I don't know how much has been done with governors. I know that there's beginning attempts to get the state legislatures involved, the National Conference of State Legislatures involved in that. I've not heard anything about the governors. I do know that there's several efforts to try to do more. This is where SHIO comes involved again, where they are very interested in trying to create reciprocal agreements and build on what SREB has done, and create reciprocal agreements that would reach out. And that's where I think that if we got the delay, that would be really helpful. But the problem is that a lot of these things are now in state laws, and so it will take a little time to create these agreements, get whatever changes to state laws or regulations are needed, and then get that going. But I think, given a little time, that what we could do is that, you know, obviously we've operated for decades where states were fine with not looking at public institutions, and public institutions were fine with not approval. That has been the practice for decades. Why can't we come up with some sort of reciprocal agreement that, just as you suggest, puts that practice into policy if that's what's required?
All right. Russ, I want to thank you for taking point on this, even in a de facto national mode. Your resources are critical for all of our institutions. I want to thank you for taking time out of your day and talking to us. And I definitely would like to point out to everybody around the table that, barring any federal relief, we have 120 days.
Yeah.
Just in case you needed a wake-up call. So fly the flag, talk to people, make sure you stay up with Russ's activities. Russ would be thrilled if you also joined WCET because they do good work. All right, Russ, thank you for your time.
Thanks, everyone, and I hope I have a more fun and up presentation next time I talk to you all.
We do too.
With all this, and then so Rob will be getting that letter when we send it out next week, and it's fine if he shares that with everyone. But I think the more voices that we have contacting leadership of all kinds, and especially Congress and Department of Ed, the better luck that we're going to have. Thank you all. We'll talk to you again. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Russ.
Does our legislature's higher ed committee could people know about this? Texas legislatures?
Probably not.
I doubt it.
Probably not, especially right now in this budget cycle.
Probably would be useful to know that, since it's going to cost considerable money.
Well, one of the things as I've been talking to folks, at our institutions around the state, that I've been asking them to do, and I'll ask you guys to do this as well. As you're contacting states, if you do run into problems, please let us know about it. There's only a limited amount that we can potentially do right now. But as Russ said, this is an issue that it looks like SHIO is going to take up. And so the more information we have in terms of the problems that our institutions are facing, the more information our commissioner will have during the SHIO discussions. So if nothing else, please let me know when you encounter problems. And I know some of you have been emailing me with specific states where you've had and are continuing to have difficulties or have just decided it's not feasible for your institution to serve those students anymore.
Do we have a website that has the point of contact at the states that
Yes.
you know about?
The web, I sent you,
Who the point of contact is?
I sent you two things a few minutes ago. I sent you a copy of Russ's presentation, and then I also sent you a link to the WCET site. As Russ mentioned at the beginning of his presentation, WCET does have right now it's a draft document. It will be posted in final form within the next couple of days. It has all the contact information for each state. It's mostly accurate. They sent it out for states to respond. Over 40 states did. There's still a few, though, that didn't, but it should be mostly accurate, and that gives you the contact person. I will tell you that I got an email this morning from one of our provosts. He copied me on correspondence, in this case with California, and California very nicely asked him what he was talking about.
Great.
So and I think you had the same response too, didn't you?
The person was on furlough, and every time I called, somebody was on furlough, so I could not get an answer from them.
So some states don't know a few states don't know about it and are just learning. Many states, I think probably most of us, are still fine-tuning our policies, and then some states know exactly what they're doing. The document that we passed around during lunch is the draft of what Texas's policy would be. And although this doesn't impact y'all, we want your input because you're in the seat of having to do this with every other state. And so just a bit of a thumbnail, and then I'll give you a couple of minutes to skim it, and maybe we can talk a little bit about it. Texas is a little bit different than many other states in that we have two state agencies that institutions are going to have to work with. They'll work with the coordinating board, which has oversight of academic degree offerings, but the state agency that actually certifies ability to operate within the state is the Texas Workforce Commission. And there's a few other states where there's that dual notification procedure that's necessary. For us, it sort of breaks down on whether or not an institution has a physical presence in Texas. That physical presence could be an internship. It could be a clinical. It could be a proctoring site. It could be a permanent agent of the institution within the state. If they have a physical presence, it triggers one set of responses. If they are not going to have a physical presence and they are accredited by either a regional accrediting body or one of the national accreditors that we recognize, then they're basically exempted from all of this and will most likely receive, at least right now, it looks like that we would probably exempt them and they would receive a letter accordingly. I think that there are a number of other states that are going that route. And then there's a whole lot where I think are where we are, which is it just depends upon the level of physical presence or non-physical presence in the state. Of those of you that have been actively engaged in this on your campus, what would your recommendations be? What would you wish that you were encountering as you work with states, and what would your recommendations be?
If you're a state agency, you're state supported, and you're accredited by one of the regional accrediting bodies, then no approval process.
Streamlined.
I sent to 50 letters to 50 states. From 8, I still have not heard from them. This has been over 6.
on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I sent out 52, in fact, because I did Puerto Rico and District of Columbia. From 8 states or entities, I still have not heard, and these letters were sent in June. There were 11 that were so costly and so detailed, everything from paying for 3 people to come for a 3-day visit to our institution in order to be accredited to do online, approved to do online programs in their state.
Do you remember which states those
Oh, I have them marked, yes. And to something like Georgia that was 71 pages long and a minimum investment of $5,000. So out of that, due to those kinds of things, 11 of them were deemed too costly to pursue. So that's just kind of a read on what the process is like.
And so, Paula, barring anything else at your institution, are you going to make a decision that students from that state are not going to enter into your program?
Well, we were doing this to decide whether to move actively into email advertising on our online programs.
But what if somebody just pops up?
Well, I went back and looked. We have students currently from 25 states. They're onesies, one from here. There are none that we have actively sought, but they're in our programs. And of those, 1, 2, 3, 4 of those were states that I had deemed, deemed too expensive or too difficult. So,
ouch.
Yeah, ouch.
Randy?
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of like California. I don't know until today what any of this is talking about. So somehow I missed the memo on this. We haven't done anything on this as far as I know, out of my office anyway, and I don't want to do it. So my input would be, if any resources, if we have any resources, put them full-fledged into getting the thing rescinded. That'd be my first recommendation. Secondly, I would like the coordinating board to handle it. Not all of our institutions individually, we don't all have the resources to commit to doing this kind of work. Somebody ought to do it for the state and then speak for every institution in the state.
Every program will be different, though. There are specifics from your institution and specifics from your programs that trigger this physical presence and things like that. It's very, very different for every program and very different for every state.
Well, it seems like we could come up with a coordinated list of, if you're this and this and this, then here's the Texas, or here's, when those people call us, well, they're going to be calling us, I guess, is one part. That's their problem. But we've got to call them.
But they're going to call the coordinating board.
Right now, Randy,
I guess
who they call.
Yes, I'm wanting the coordinating board to call all these states for all of our particular issues. If not, we're all going to be replicating this at a cost of millions, whatever that $5 million was, multiply that by 6 or 7 times for Texas.
James?
Well, to me, it's just even more complicated. I don't think the coordinating board can help them. It's every institution is going to have a different marketing strategy.
James,
on the different
microphone.
Thank you. Every institution is going to have a different marketing strategy, even if they have similar programs. I just don't see how anybody's going to be able to centralize it and take care of it for us.
Well, just with the issue of internships, it gets into an issue. Is there a person supervising the internship? Are they an employee of your institution? Right. Do you pay them? Does the student find them? There are numerous questions that are very detailed.
Matt?
Well, my response to Randy's suggestion that Van get busy and start contacting these states for us is that federal financial aid will not be withheld from the coordinating board. It will be withheld from our institution. So that's enough onus for us to go ahead and start doing something. And in fact, we've done that. We've got a small task force working with institutional research, with legal, Office of the Provost. We've drafted a letter saying to send to this list from WCET when it comes out today. I checked the other day, the revised list is not there. They're going to revise their point of contacts. Everyone on that list is going to get a letter from us saying, here's a list of all of our programs which may have a student enrolled in your state. Please advise us. At least that shows some kind of due diligence that we're attempting to do something. Also, something that he didn't mention, Russ didn't mention, is that APLU has been involved. They're getting involved, which I think is a good thing politically because of their voice on the Hill, and hopefully that will help move this either recension or extension forward. And thirdly, there was some language somewhere earlier about marketing even. I mean, you can't market out of state. You can't send a poster to Las Vegas to a convention for your reading teachers without permission. I mean, it's just
and your
really
email
asinine.
list, whether they're targeted to citizens of that state or whether they're a blanket email to several states or nationally, that makes a difference. That's what I was actually doing, was pursuing the idea of marketing.
Exactly.
And so
and we do email blast all the time. Huh? It's just
right, but if you target to a state, it triggers, in some cases, physical presence.
Do you have to block Google searches?
I don't know. But the language is so different from state to state. It seems like if this was a federal law, that there should be some continuity or some definitions of what these issues are and how they're handled.
It's something of an anomalous federal law. It's a federal law. It says go talk
About
to the
states' rights.
You are required to go talk to a state.
My inclination is to do exactly what Randy is suggesting, because in my view this is encouraging bad behavior. My problem is the same as what Claudia was saying. I don't understand the rationale behind it. Unless I understand the rationale behind it, I'm not really highly motivated to respond to it in an appropriate way.
Well, I think what I got from Russ's comments was that it was kind of a mistake. It became a federal law unintentionally, and surely in this day of good reason, if we all band together to fight this thing, federal legislators will erase this bad mistake. In my opinion, it seems like.
All right, I'm going to need to wrap up the
waste of money.
conversation on this topic as we move forward.
The link on the website for the list is not an active link for the final. It says final versions PDF released February 28, 2011, state approval regulations for distance at a starter list, and it's not an active link.
It should be. I mean, it was yesterday, and they are in the process of updating. It's supposed to come out today, so just keep checking. I'm sure it's going to be. I've pulled it down from that link in the last week. Mark, did you have something?
Well, in spirit, I agree with Randy. It would be nice if, it was approached from a state level. If the states would look at their state accredited institutions and say, all right, other guys, why don't we just trade out here and be done with it? That seems to be a logical avenue. But without knowing what started all this, was this some state who wanted to lock out everyone else except their own institutions? Was it just against the for-profits? Without knowing how this came about, it's kind of hard to figure out, well, what they really want to do. And I'm wondering, too, did you say it's Georgia that has the 5,000 if nothing else, I'm afraid our institution would just have to write them a letter and say, we've got a student there. We really can't afford that, so we're hoping you'll just waive those fees, and, at least that would show our good intentions, but...
There was one state that wants you to keep up with all of the students from their state and return 10% of the tuition to that state.
All right, we're gonna allow Mac to have the final comment.
I'm just kind of curious, if we're going to look at this from a state level, and I agree there's some rationale behind doing that. I don't know that it's 100% of the rationale, but from my perspective, looking at this as strictly a legal matter, do we base it strictly on accreditation? And if so, the coordinating board has recognized not only regional accreditors, but national accreditors. So then we get into the situation where we have to try and work the agreement statewide, not only for SACS accredited institutions, but for SACS plus all the other regional accreditors, plus all of the national accreditors that the coordinating board deals with. So it becomes a much more complex issue at the state level even than it is at the local level. Granted, I think having all 38 of our general academics and 50 community colleges and the TSTCs and the Lamars and everybody else trying to do this one-on-one to the state, to 50 other states, gets to be a very significant challenge. And so I think that there is some value in trying to look at this from the state level, and we are and have had discussions like that. However, I just want you all to think about the fact that we can't, from my perspective, and there certainly will be others, it would be challenging for us to simply say we are only going to try and create a nationwide state-to-state compact for SACS accredited institutions or public institutions when we have recognized other accreditors beyond that and could be seen as being disproportionately favoring public institutions over even the ICUT schools, which are going to be in the same position that all of your institutions are in. So it's just something for you all to kind of think about too, and some of the things that we've been trying to work with and figure out where to go from here as well. So it's not a perfect situation any way we look at it. So.
And I think if there's anything that you can take away from the sense of the DEAC, it's a general sense of alarm and near panic.
We have a solution. It says if you're a federal school, a religious school, or a tribal institution, you're exempt. So do you want to be an American Indian? Or do you want to be, I think you're going to have to choose.
There you go.
There you go. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike.
You might want to be careful.
Two last things, because I know that we're going to move on and continue the discussion of the white paper. If you would, please take a look at what we have as a draft right now of our policies for for institutions outside of Texas. And if you could, in the next few days, email me any comments or thoughts that you have on it. I very much want to take your experiences in this, in dealing with other states, into consideration as we put the final touches on the policy that we're going to be sharing with TWC and make sure that we're on the same page with them. Second thing about enforcement, and just to sort of echo, I think, what Matt or James said about federal financial aid. Several times a year, I get a call from our friendly Department of Education office in Dallas asking me if I am aware that the following public institutions in Texas are offering courses and programs at the following off-campus locations, because they are doing spot check audits. So I would imagine that after July 1st, if this rule stays in place, what would happen is that I would also get calls from my friendly Department of Ed people saying, are you aware that this university from Tennessee has students who are online in your state? So I think that that is most likely to be, it might not be the only enforcement mechanism, but it is most likely to be one of the enforcement mechanisms. And I routinely get those calls right now. so that you know, I ask them to email it to me, and then I make sure that y'all have told me this, which is why you need to make sure that you tell us whenever you teach off campus. But I think that that will also be one of the ways that they will try to enforce.
Okay, fun times in distance ed. We live in challenging times. All right, let's shift our brain back to something perhaps a little more upbeat, which is the white paper. And given where we are on the clock, I would entertain suggestions as to how we move this forward to finalize it. How do we gather more comments? How do we make editorial changes and processes and move it forward in the near future? Obviously, what I'd like to be able to do is call this document the sense of the DEAC, call it done, and get it into circulation before the next DEAC meeting, because at the next DEAC meeting we're going to be late in the legislative cycle, and I think it has utility sooner rather than later. Okay. So, talk to me about the appropriate process. And let me look first to Patrick and to Ron about how they'd like to move this forward, being their baby.
Well, right now it's up on the wiki.
Yep.
So everybody is invited to throw their comments into that. That would probably be the most efficient and most rapid way we could get input from you and redo this and get it back to you quickly. And we'll probably be more successful in getting your input if you'll agree to a deadline. Say, do it by this date, and at that point, Patrick and I can take it and move forward.
Agreed.
What do you think?
Other thought?
Sounds agreeable to me. Does everybody have access to the wiki? I know we keep referring, hey, this is out there, this is out there. Everybody has their credentials to get into it and is comfortable doing that?
If you haven't been to the wiki, I encourage you to go. It's if you need those instructions. Actually, Patrick, do you mind if I point them to you?
That's fine.
Okay.
That's fine.
If you don't have instructions on how to get into the wiki, email Patrick Plush at North Texas.
It's on the membership list that was circulated.
Yep.
There were a number of ideas that surfaced in the previous conversation. I trust you'll take those as well, or do we need to enter those again?
If you made them, send them again, but it never hurts.
When you say it surfaced in the previous discussion before lunch?
We talked about developmental education. We talked about providing more funding for the Texas Virtual Network, those kind of things.
I would say put them in the wiki and state them with the emphasis. I know it sounds like work. And the call for bold statements, I think that was one of your ideas. And, you know, why aren't we jumping on the VCT bandwagon of collaboration? And as Ron and I were working through this process, and Ron's way too modest about the role that he has played in facilitating that collaboration among the public community colleges, but he didn't want it to be the VCT show either. So a lot of that is moderated throughout there, and I think that exactly that type of collaboration is what we're speaking for, those bold statements that this is possible, it is being done, and we can do that instead of creating something brand new. Let's take the good ideas we have and make sure they're working throughout the higher education system in Texas, not just within VCT, for example. And one of the things, and I don't know if everybody caught this, it's one of the appendices, and I don't know if everybody reads those, but it was taking some of the software that had been developed to facilitate VCT and that type of collaboration being taken and used by Texas A&M in order to accomplish those same kind of things. And that's the type of innovation I think that we want to promote more of. But yes, if you wouldn't mind, I took some notes here about different things that were suggested, and there were so many and they were flying pretty fast. I know I heard about CalPass and STARS, a couple of the things that would ease transfer, but I'm not sure I captured them all. I'm happy to put out there skeletal notes of what I have, but I really appreciate it. If you made a comment, something you feel strongly about, go out there, embellish it, put your own language in it. I might not represent it correctly.
I would like to suggest that we target March 25th. That's 3 weeks. Is that acceptable? All right. So we're going to hold this open for collaboration and discussion on the wiki. Please do jump in. It is relatively painless if you haven't collaborated on a wiki before. And as of the close of business on the 25th, we will review and see what we've got. Does that sound all right, guys? Okay. And then we'll decide how to move forward. If contentious issues come up and there's still, a lot of discussion, then we'll figure out how we move forward there. Ron?
I would make one comment, though. If we're wanting this to be a document for reference in terms of legislative discussions, the 25th is very late.
Okay. All right. Quicker? All right.
Or before spring break?
The
We ought to do it by the end of next week.
end of next week is the 11th. Can we do it by then?
Yeah.
All right, keep it front of mind. Let's get on it. The 11th. Good comment. Thank you. All right. All right, we have one last item. It's not on the agenda, but I wanted simply to have an update on another task force that was created the last time we met, which was to review the principles of good practice for blended and hybrid. And Randy was taking that. So, Randy?
And let me first clarify on the other issue. Van knows I wasn't trying to dump all the state's work on her, but to
Oh, no.
hopefully get her a big promotion.
Dump it all on me. But that's okay.
Hoping you get
We're all
a
behind
big
you.
promotion over a whole office of people to coordinate.
Yeah,
whatever.
right.
Yeah, right. And it rolls downhill.
In light of other discussions, this almost seems minuscule. I thought it was after we had a few discussions by email with this subcommittee talking about the question is, do we need a separate principles of good practice document focusing just on hybrid courses? And we tried to limit ourselves first to just that question, and those who participated in those email exchanges, the answer was an overwhelming no, that we can take the current document that we have and adjust it well enough to address those.
And we've already seen that today with some of our comments about some of the other things in which we've already included hybrid as part of that language.
Yep. Good.
So this is being
Yeah. So did pass around what is just our current work in progress. As Rob said, I guess I'm not going to take any action or vote on this today, but this is just our thinking at this point. In its simplest form, probably point number 4 under the basic assumptions. The whole issue might be addressed just by adding what you see added there in the text in blue that makes an attempt at wording like Nathaniel just said. Other than that, though, we tried not to launch into editing the principles document. We tried to resist that temptation, although I think the feelings of the group are that maybe it's time for some editing on it. We didn't feel like that was really our...
Just volunteered for, right?
Well, I tried to throttle the group back and say, let's try to answer this one main charge right now, but my guess is probably be volunteered to continue with any further editing if the group wanted that to happen. So you can see some strike-throughs and additions that we've kind of already begun on, but that's where our thinking is right now, and I'll answer any questions or let anybody else speak.
Thoughts? All right. Yes, sir.
As I was looking at it, one of my questions was, electronically delivered, is that getting a little dated? I can't think of how many years it's been since I've heard people actually use that to refer to something, so.
Van?
That's
Yeah,
wordsmithing.
that's a good point, and deserves more wordsmithing. But I can say my thoughts are that the broader this gets, you do have to have some kind of all-encompassing or umbrella type words, and I played around a little bit with adding the word hybrid to the title, but then it doesn't breaks other rules and other things. So we didn't launch any deeper into those discussions, but it's questions like that that probably need to be addressed if there is to be any further editing of it.
Well, I think it would be a useful charge to follow up with the editing of the document. I think you adequately answered the first question, was separate or combined. Y'all thought about that? The answer is combined. Now you've got a good stab at that, so I would support moving forward and having the next iteration be a more thorough discussion of the edits and bring it to us.
So a thorough updating of the principles of good practice.
What do y'all think? Can you tell me again who's on the group?
I can. It's in the minutes from the previous meeting.
I knew you were going to say that. Oh, yeah. Thank you. Good. This is
third page.
That's
Near
okay.
the bottom.
Yeah.
Number 12.
Well, if you know you're on it, tell me you're on it.
Here. James Andrews, Brett Million, Matt Baker, Nate Hewitt.
Thank you.
Ann Morris, Kingston.
There it is. Sune, Matt Workman,
Mark,
okay.
and myself.
Is that group still engaged? Do we need to refresh? Anybody want in? Anybody want out of that group as you go through this next iteration? I'm much more interested in hearing about the latter, the former than the latter. Okay. Does that seem like fair game? All right.
Great.
Other issues, other old business, anything else before we adjourn this meeting today? All right.
I have one
Yes.
question. As we go through after spring break and the semester ending, we all get busier and busier. And I know that actually since Van's going to be coordinating this whole new federal effort thing for us, that they get busier and busier too at the coordinating board. The sooner we can pick a date, even if
Yep.
it's over a month and a half off, the better, for one, to protect the time.
Agreed.
It would be fabulous.
Agreed.
We will try. The challenge that we've been running into is actually, you're only the second group that's met in this space. So we've been running into some very serious space issues. We're also now running into legislative issues, but we will try to do that. I think tentatively we're thinking about a late April meeting, and we'll go ahead and see in the next week if we can't get some choices out to you and see when you want to meet.
And let me, this came up in a casual discussion earlier, and let me do a very quick poll by show of hands. Would anybody be interested in convening over dinner the night before our next meeting, just for more socialization, to help build this network out a little bit? I mean, it occurred to me that as volunteers, we don't get a whole lot out of this other than the chance to engage with each other and build our network, but we seldom have the opportunity to actually sit down and do that. So would anybody be interested in figuring out a way to either bookend a social activity before or after the next meeting?
I can recommend some very good food trailers.
Yes.
As can Rob.
Show of hands. Everybody? All right, good. So we'll try to engage that as well. Anya?
Point for clarification. I think someone expressed earlier about concerns about an exorbitant amount of fees in regards to the distance education rule. Is that one of the things that's deterring you from going to that particular state? And is that something you'd like us to look into more?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I think it's very clear. Not only is it, yes, I think that's the monetary issue. It's simply the time issue. for each institution to engage this times 40 or 50 seems to be duplicative and painful.
Okay.
All right, folks, before I take a motion for adjournment, I want to point out two things. Well, a couple of things. One, we have a couple of subcommittees that have some work to do. I want to make sure that they're going to engage each other, move forward. For the new one, I think the first order of business is to select a chair from among yourselves. We have
About the institutional
Yes.
plan?
Yes.
We already did that.
Badass. Badass. I love you guys. Excuse me, that was on the record. I mean, I'm excited.
Who's the chair? Him.
Nathaniel, you're the chair? Lucky you.
I'm arranging.
All right. Do pay attention to the issues about federal acknowledgement of states. And by the 11th, by next Friday, a week from this Friday, do jump on the wiki, review that white paper, and let's collect our comments. And Van says?
I'm sorry, let me pull it up. I believe I just got something from WCET. Yes. I literally, in the last 30 seconds, got an email from WCET notifying us that they have compiled and revised the information into a final document, and that they are not going to continue to revise, but that they may post addendums at the WCET website. So it appears that that final version is now up, and I'm guessing the reason why you wasn't live when you clicked on it, Claudia, was that they were in the process of putting it up.
Yep. All right, motion to adjourn? Second? All right.
Who seconded?
Who seconded?
I did. There's a number of them.